guys, welcome back to the Pineapple Party Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Pineapple Party Podcast. My name is Jensen and I'm your host. Today we have a tutor in economics, Mr. Framjee Hathy. He's also a PhD student. It's so good to have you here, Fram.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it feels great to be here as well.
Yeah, and by the way, I have I have your permission to call you Fram, correct?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
Okay,
I would
perfect,
prefer it. Yeah.
perfect, perfect, wonderful. Yeah, so if you don't mind, can you tell us about your background? How did you get yourself involved in academia? Why did you choose Monash University here in Malaysia, etc.?
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I am a PhD student at Monash University Malaysia, and I currently focus on development and political economics. On the side, I also am, well, not on the side, it's also part of my requirements as a PhD student. I am also a tutor at Monash University, and I teach first year microeconomics. So aside from that, I also do a lot of immersion projects for Monash, usually engaging with students that come down from Australia, students from within Malaysia as well. And I guess like maybe if I can, even a little bit of hobbies, I'm just like outside of the world of academia. It's a very down-to-earth guy, just enjoy gaming, a few sports like basketball and stuff like that. How did I get interested or how did I get involved in economics? Or like this might take a little while, yeah. So
Perfect.
um so right now I'm in my postgrad. So before I even came to university, I had an idea like, oh, I want to study economics. So I think I was in high school. I had just finished my ordinary levels. So just for context, I'm not Malaysian, I'm Sri Lankan. So I'm from over in Sri Lanka. I did the General Certificate of Education, which is like British advanced level education.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like, so at this point you get to choose your subjects. So I was thinking like, oh, what are the three stereotypical subjects that bring honor to any Asian household, right? Which is engineering, doctor, and lawyer.
Yes.
Engineer, maybe that's South Asia. Maybe it might be the same here. I'm not sure.
It's
So it's
exactly the
like,
same. It's
is it
exactly the
exactly
same.
the same?
We are all
Okay.
united in
Oh,
our disappointment to our parents.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, doctor sounds great, right? Because my mom's side of the family, textbook overachievers, so many doctors there. So I was like, oh, ultimately I want to help people, I want to understand people. And I felt like medicine was the path to do that through. But as I was preparing to study for, to become a doctor, my mom's side of the family, I spoke to a lot of the doctors and they were like, oh, don't do it. They were like, it's a very stressful job. You're
Yeah.
not going to enjoy it. You strike me as somebody who likes, going abroad, engaging with people. Even if you do go and study abroad, you might have trouble coming back and getting your medical license, etc.
Oh
So they were
wow.
like, don't do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, wow, okay, if the people in the field are telling me not to do it, maybe I should, give that a bit of
Yeah.
thought. And I was a bit lost for a while. And I was one day I was going to physics because I was doing the four subjects that you kind of need to be a doctor: mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology.
Yeah.
And I was going to physics class, and I was listening to this podcast, the Freakonomics radio podcast,
Oh wow.
and I was like, wow, this is so interesting. So Freakonomics it kind of like showed me. So its tagline was the hidden side of everything, the economics of the hidden side of everything.
Right.
And I realized that economics, I had the idea that, oh, it's just about money, it's just about jobs. But no, it's actually about the people who, you know, create the economy, they create the money, they create the jobs. And I was like, wow, so it actually economics focuses on understanding people.
Right.
And it's very interesting. There's a lot of interconnected moving parts. And around this time, I was also doing what was known as Model United Nations,
Yeah.
where I was like sort of like representing nations. So I was very in touch with world news, and I was like, wow, this was around I think 2014. Yeah, I come across a bit old. I hope I'm not the oldest guest you had in the podcast.
I'll make sure of that. I'll make sure of that.
So around this time, it was 2014. I think Russia was invading Crimea, Hope I don't land you in hot water with that delineation. But yeah, so this was during the invasion of Crimea, annexation. Annexation, I think, is the politically safe word. And I was like, wow, okay, so I can see like, oh, Russia is like one of the world's biggest contributors to oil, and because people are kind of like avoiding their oil, that's why the price of the local gas station, the local petrol station, is like going up. And I
Right.
was like, wow, so this is economics, that's like the macro side of it, the larger scope. So I was like, this is very interesting. I feel like this is something I could do.
Right.
So for my A levels, I just kind of like dived into economics, mathematics, because you need mathematics to go with economics.
Yeah.
And I did biology. Like just randomly, I just threw in a science subject that I still love.
Just in case the route of medicine is still there.
Still there. Maybe I could do something in the lines of like psychology or maybe like, that it
Yeah.
was very interesting to me. I still like so long story short, I don't mind sharing this. I got two A's and a B, and the B was in economics. But I was like, you know what? My parents are disappointed, but I think I can still give this a go, I think it's
Yeah.
quite nice. And but all jokes aside, my parents were very supportive. They were like, "Oh, so where would you like to study economics? What do you think?" Or like, well, which university? Because I think you did ask, like, how did I end up at Monash University Malaysia, right?
Yes.
So I was looking around and I sort of was like stuck between a rock and a hard place because the better universities that have like higher rankings and higher reputations, I would need a scholarship for because they're so further out, right?
Right.
Away from Asia. And I was thinking like, oh, well, here's Monash. It's in Malaysia. It's close to home, only a 3 hour flight.
Right.
Culture, weather, well, not the culture, but the weather is very similar.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know anything about the culture. So I was like, why not give Malaysia a go, right? And Monash is like, a top, back then it was like 60th in the world. Now it's like 54th or something.
Yes.
So I was like, reputation, it matters, right? So I was like, why don't I give it a go? So I came over here. I majored in economics and management for my undergrad,
All right.
and I just fell in love with economics. Like all of the subjects, all the lecturers, they brought like a lot of passion to
Yeah.
what they were teaching, and I just kind of felt like, wow, this is what I want to do. I was very happy. I was very motivated. I went
Right.
to every lecture. I went to every tutorial.
Okay, that's
Um,
rare for a university student. So
exactly,
fair
exactly.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can say. I think this is fine. I don't think I land in hot water, but management, I went for all the tutorials. I did not go for the lectures because it was kind of like to me, it was like, oh, it was like almost common sense. No
Right.
offense to anyone from management, but
Yeah.
to me at the time. But with economics, it was like, wow, like, the lecturer would sometimes like stop for a second and go, look, this is the real world application
Right.
of what I'm teaching. So I was like, wow, like, Monash is really giving me that edge that I really enjoy. And at the end of my undergrad, I stood out to a couple of lecturers and they came up to me and they were like, oh, we have this program at Monash where you can do an extra year after your 3 years of undergrad. You can do an extra year called your honors year,
Yes.
where you kind of do like a mini research module. You kind of make like a mini paper.
Okay.
So we think you're a good fit for that. Would you want to try it out? And I was like, sure, yeah. I mean, I get to spend more time in Monash, where the people were amazing. I just love the culture at Monash. I get to spend more time in Malaysia. I really love Malaysia. Like it was so like heartwarming and friendly over here. It just gelled. Yeah, yeah, I just gelled.
Yeah.
I just loved it here.
That's
So I was like,
amazing.
sure, yeah, I'll sign up for this extra year. This was during COVID. So COVID started into my second semester, but I still like managed to finish my honors.
Right.
I passed out with a first class honors. So in Australia, if you get a first class honors, then you can go on to PhD.
Oh
You
wow.
can
Okay.
circumvent masters. Yeah, you don't actually have to do your master. You can go straight into PhD.
Jump straight into the PhD program.
Exactly.
Oh,
So
that's
there,
phenomenal.
then exactly, yeah. And my lecturers were like, you already kind of meet the criteria, so why don't you try PhD? It's like, oh, but at this point they were like, okay, are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
do you want to try the private sector? Do you want to, do something else? And at the time, I was about 22, 21, and I was like, I've done internships,
Right.
I've done jobs in the private sector, but I feel like it wasn't really working for me. I felt
Mm.
like research was kind of like my calling.
Right.
And I started, so I was like, okay, sure, I'll sign up for PhD as well. Dived in. So as we came out of COVID, like I think 2021, that was when they brought back classes as well. So one of the requirements, like I mentioned earlier about PhDs, you got to also teach.
Yeah.
And I realized like, wow, like I am currently in the role that my lecturers were in, the same lecturers who kind of inspired me to do economics, and I
Yeah.
felt a bit nervous because, like, by and of itself, if you don't explain it properly, economics is a very boring subject. I feel like people would be like, "Oh, economics." So
That's how
I
I felt, to
really
be honest.
that's what felt.
I
Okay,
can't
yeah, there
lie.
you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's but if it's not if you're not given the right introduction, I
Yeah.
feel like any subject can be very boring. Like mathematics could be the worst subject on earth
Oh,
if you
that's
don't have
very
a good
fair.
math teacher, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So going into teaching, I was like, because Monash kind of has this bit of a gung-ho attitude, I would say. They're like, okay, you are pretty good academically. Here you go,
Right.
teach. They obviously they
Oh,
give us
right.
like practice and
Resources
they
and
do give
practice,
us
right.
like workshops and everything, but they were kind of like, here you go. Like, they very much are like learn by doing kind of.
Yeah.
So, what I did was I first made myself very approachable when it came to like teaching, and then I realized like, wow, like it's very easy if you genuinely enjoy the subject to explain it to someone. It also helped me understand it better. I felt like even when I was a student, I was helping my friends in undergrad with economics.
Right.
It really helped me understand if I was teaching them. Because then
Yes.
I had to kind of like know the layers to what I'm teaching. I had to understand like this is why X causes Y, for
Yeah.
example. And in the middle there might be a Z, then all of that is going on.
But not only that, right? Because not only do you need to understand it, you need to understand it enough to be able to communicate it in other ways that people will understand it better.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because not everyone is gonna get it off the bat, right? So
Exactly.
there are like I think like traditional Asian schooling is like, oh, there's the smart kids and there's the, for lack of a better word, quote unquote, dumb kids,
And
right? That's the old way of teaching.
there's the power of the ruler as well.
Exactly. There's the power of the rotan, right? You call it here, I think the
Yeah, the
rotan, the
rotan makes
cane.
everybody understand
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Back home it was the ruler, but I
Yeah.
went to an international school, so I heard horror stories, but
You avoided it. Yeah, that's
I
amazing.
avoided it. Yeah. So, but over in Monash, it's very much there's students who will get it at first, and
Yeah.
there's students who need a little bit more explanation.
Right.
We kind of, I think at Monash, I think a lot of the leading universities, there's no such thing as a bad student. But there is such a thing as a bad teacher. So we
Right.
really kind of like at the end of every like theory that I would explain, I would be like, does anyone have any questions? And it's the first thing that we try to establish at Monash is it's totally fine to have questions. If you don't know something, it's totally fine. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn together. And sometimes I might be wrong. That was one of the it was kind of like a surreal thing. I don't think I remember my lecturer saying it, but I would constantly say to my students, like, I might be wrong. Like you might catch me on something. I might say something that's wrong. Like, please go ahead. Like,
Yeah.
that creates like and this classroom should be more like a conversation. It shouldn't be like oh, I'm the teacher, I'm telling you what to do kind
Yeah.
of thing,
Exactly. Exactly.
and I found that it was very easy to kind of like then like make it quite approachable.
Mm.
And also when I created that attitude of or the atmosphere of like it's fine to ask questions, then students kind of, even the students who don't get it off the fly, they're like they know what they don't know. So then they
Right.
can ask you the doubt, and then you're like, right. So I actually forgot to explain that in depth. I kind of glossed over it.
Right.
And maybe the quote unquote smart kids, maybe they've done an economics course before in high school, or maybe just kind of like they connected the dots, but not everyone's going to connect that, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, right. So actually, this is how I improve as well. Like, I need to explain that properly because otherwise it just seems like I jumped a step.
Yeah.
So doing this kind of like yeah, aside from research in the PhD, like the teaching side of it, I just fell in love with it. Like, it was really nice. And I really am that kind of person who, if the energy of the class is very high, like if everyone wants to like join in, then I'm like, wow, okay, like I can just go on for hours.
Yeah.
And even if it's not, I really don't find it a hassle to kind of like increase the energy level of the class. So I was like, okay, right, I'm doing teaching, I'm doing research, and it's really, I enjoy both things.
Yeah.
3 years down the line, like right now I'm in my final year. I still love teaching. Research, it's a burden, it's a labor of love, but
Yeah.
hanging in there, hanging in there.
Yes, and I believe in you fully for sure.
Thank
And
you so much.
I think well for I would like to add on to your point with teaching. I think what you're doing by telling them, "Hey, I might be wrong in this."
Yeah,
I'm not this general who's like commanding everybody, telling you what to do, telling you what to take in. But I think that is very effective because that communicates trust and openness. And of course, when there is trust and when there's communication, even if I walk in, and let's say I'm an art student and I've been studying digital media and I don't know anything about economics, you would still create an environment that is encouraging for me to ask questions, even if it's something like, sir, what is economics? Like, I don't even know. Like, sir, what am I doing here? And you could, I don't feel like I would be judged for that,
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I had two students in my very first semester of teaching who were from engineering.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, wow. So in undergrad, I also did come across these students, and usually, like engineering is a very mathematically heavy unit. You know, it's very you can tell at Monash, you can tell the difference between a business student and an engineering student. One still has like hope in like in their eyes, and the other one
Yeah.
just it's like done. It's like
It's the husk of their former selves, yeah.
exactly, exactly. And they were kind of taking this unit, I think to kind of a boost their WAM, but also like de-stress a little bit
Yeah.
from the heavy rigor of the engineering units.
Which is insane for
Uh,
me, because I do business and arts. For
yeah,
me, distressing would be like film studies, not
exactly,
microeconomics.
exactly,
No way.
exactly. So, and it just goes to show, right, the different wavelengths of students that you get. And
Yeah.
they asked me like, oh, like we're from engineering, we've never done like business units. We feel like we're new, and I was like, that's fine. Like there are people in this class who've never touched economics, even though they're from a business background.
Right.
Maybe they did like I don't know what the local equivalent is. They did like business studies and accounting, finance, but they never did economics.
Right.
Go ahead and ask any questions, right? This class is like the 101. This is meant for people who've not touched economics before.
Right.
And it will help everyone if you ask questions. So I realized like one thing about, I think maybe it might be something to do with Asian schooling. People are scared to ask questions. People are
Yeah.
scared to kind of engage in debate. Like everyone's very quiet. They kind of like feel like, oh, if I ask a question, the teacher's going to get mad at me,
Yes.
right? And I had to set about like creating this. Like, first of all, I'm not a teacher. I'm a tutor. You can even call me like Fram. You don't need to even say Mister or Sir. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation. And if you don't understand something, that's great. Like, we can talk, but that gives us something to do in the tutorial because that's
Yeah.
what the tutorial is there for. And it's like if you get something wrong, that's totally fine because then we can figure out like what's confusing, what's not making sense, and work on it together.
Yes.
So these engineering students actually did perform like really well, right? They did really well. 'Cause they were very happy and eager to ask questions because they knew like, okay, there are other people in this class also like me who have not touched economics before.
Right.
And this is an environment where we want to know what we don't know so that we can understand the subject as a whole, right? It's not
Yeah.
about scoring the right answer. That is school. University is like understanding the concept, applying the concept.
Right.
So creating that is like, and that's why I feel like to me, I love being in university, like, staying in, I've been in Monash now for like 6 years,
Oh,
going
wow.
on 6 years. Yeah, yeah. And it was like night and day for me from school because in school, it's very hard to kind of like love what you're doing because
Yeah.
it's very like there's a lot going on in school, right? And you're still a kid, you're still like learning, but it's like also like, there's a lot of pressure to like score these perfect grades.
It's
But I
always
think
just
in
exams, exams, exams.
exams. And like that's one of the things Monash is moving away from, this like heavy exam culture into more like, do we give you like understand and knowledge that you can apply? Because ultimately, why do you go to university? You do it to get a job, right?
Right.
Or you have the few psychos like me who want to keep, doing like
Stay in
research
the
and want
system, yeah.
to stay in the system. But on average, like 98% of students will want to um like go into the private sector. So are we giving you something that you can apply and use? Because what is an exam? Like, you just cram for it and then you forget about it, right? You
Right.
you you don't learn any skills. You just kind of like show that you can take everything in a second and then let it out. And that's not what economics is about either. We want you to like learn, okay, this is how the economy operates, so that in your day-to-day life you could just understand and use it. So teaching students that it's no longer about this perfect grade
Yeah.
was also like very tricky. Also like that, I hope I'm not like going off like off
No,
topic here for
no.
a second.
You are perfectly fine.
Okay, so I think one of the issues is again coming from like an Asian perspective is we are always taught like the highest grade possible matters.
Yes.
Get that 4.0 GPA that at Monash we have weighted average score wham.
Yeah.
Get that 80% and above wham, you know? Um but honestly speaking, if I can just like give a little bit of insight here is that when I was applying for, internships, private sector jobs,
Right.
they don't really care about your your I mean, sure, like a 3.0 GPA or even a 2.5 is fine. Like it just shows that okay,
Oh wow.
you did your units, you did not fail. Obviously, failing is a companies
Different
do pay
story,
attention to
right?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, if you're an HR manager or a recruiter, you're looking at a stack of CVs. Everybody's getting 3.0s, 4.0s. Everybody's showing these like in especially in Asia, like all of these high achievers are
Right.
scoring high. Companies have kind of now come to terms with like, yeah, a 3.0 GPA, 2.5 is fine. What have you done in university? Like, did you take part in clubs in society? Did you,
Right.
start your own clubs? Did you start your own podcast? Things like that.
Right.
These really stand out on a CV,
So
right?
is it because well, specifically for Malaysia, Asia, and all that, is it because everyone already has such a high um, kind of score on paper that that's no longer a distinct, advantage that companies look for? It's kind of become this white noise, and instead, what they focus on, as you've said, is like, well, I get that everyone's getting good grades, but what makes you different? What makes you stand out?
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. It's
Right.
precisely that. Like, because the competition is so high. Like, I'm not gonna even our parents always like to tell us like, oh, you have it easy, but actually, I feel like we have it really tough, right? Millennials, Gen Zs, Alpha's not yet ready, but millennials and Gen Zs, we're like entering this marketplace where everyone has a degree. The bare
Yeah.
minimum is a degree, right? Um, and yeah, like everyone's scoring like 2.5s, 3.0 GPAs. 4.0 GPA used to be rare. Like, like probably during our parents' time, you score 4.0 GPA, the company's like, we don't care about anything else, you're hired,
Yeah.
just off that score.
Yeah.
But now it's
No
like
social
everyone has
skills come right in.
exactly. Come right in. Yeah, we don't know you as a person, but that score is something we've never seen before. Come right in.
Yeah.
Um, but now in this day and age where education is like so important to everyone and everyone goes to university and gets that degree, 4.0 GPAs are becoming common. They
Right.
actually is a sad truth. It's something I had to deal with as well because I'd been conditioned from a young age that like the more you score, the more you stand out. Not really. Everyone's scoring, right? At the end of
Yeah.
the day. And that's great. Like you shouldn't be upset about that. That's amazing. That means that people on average are doing better and better.
Yeah.
But what that means is in the workplace, they want to be like, okay, now we know that on average, the applicant is going to be, because what does that score show at the end of the day? It shows you can learn something
Yeah.
and you can answer based on it. But now we want to see, okay, what else can you do? Were you able to multitask? Were you able to do stuff in university while maintaining, like if you have a 4.0 GPA and you were the captain of the cheer team, you
Yeah.
were the MVP of your basketball team or whatever like that. Like that is amazing. That shows that you can not only give consistently high results, but you can also because when you join a workforce,
Yeah.
especially in Asia, you're not going to be only working on your job. You're going to get side projects. You're going to
Yes.
get other stuff as well. They
Right.
want to see that you can handle that because it shows you have character, you have an outgoing personality, you can handle stress because you have to study, but you also have to deliver in that club or that society as well.
Right.
So, if you hold a position in these clubs, if you start your own thing, that is amazing. That just shows initiative, that just shows entrepreneurship. And
Right.
it definitely helps out in the future as well when because now everyone has a degree. What do people want? They want a master's, they want a professional certification in like whatever. So having these extra stuff helps you apply for a scholarship down the line into these things. I'm kind
Right.
of like divulging now into like counseling, I guess, like career counseling. I hope it's okay, but this is like
This is all
my
gold, so
insight.
it's amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great to hear. Yes, yeah. So ultimately dialing it back to the question, like keeping it back to the question, yes, everyone's doing quite well, and these companies kind of want to see what makes you just so different from the rest. Like what else have you done, you know? So don't shy away. I would say like to people who are applying to university who are only focused on getting that golden grade. don't shy away from like other stuff as well.
Trying extracurriculars, meeting people,
Exactly.
networking. Mm.
Exactly. Because you never know that person that you meet and network with might be somebody who ends up, working for the firm that you're at and is like, hey, I know
Yeah.
this person. I knew them from university.
Right.
They were great. And the HR manager is like, oh, this is their CV. They'll literally like this is a genuine conversation that can happen. They'll literally just go through they don't have stacks of CVs anymore. They have files. They'll probably just search up their name and they're like, this CV, this person is like, yeah, I knew that person from uni. They were really dependable. And the HR manager is gonna be like, okay, so one of our own is already, recommending this
Oh
person. Like
wow.
yeah. Of course, they will pay attention to that CV and look at like, do you meet the basic criteria? Do you have a good
100%.
GPA? Yeah. But because you were, personally referenced, and that's how it works, right? Ultimately, the private sector is run by people. And if you are known to those people, it is going to help your chances
Like
at these
streamline your
companies.
process.
Exactly.
Right.
I think this is a very well-known saying, which is you are the sum of your friends, or you are the group of your friends. So
Right.
basically, let's say you in university you want to be an accountant, you want to be someone in finance. Like if you join like I think Monash has like a finance or accounting club or something like that. You
Oh
make
yes.
friends in these. I think they do, right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
they do.
So if you make friends in these clubs and societies, and these people will almost definitely go on to work in the accounting sector, right?
Yeah.
And like down the line, you may network with them again, or they may see your CV or something like that, and that really helps. So I think it's a given in like Asian culture as well that in the private sector there's a bit of nepotism or there's a bit of favoritism
Yeah.
towards so that is another skill that university doesn't officially say, but it's something that they provide,
Yeah.
that ability to network with people who are going to go and be placed in the industry, and then that helps you to match.
Yeah.
It increases your chances because there's always going to be an element of luck, right, when you're applying for a
Yes.
job. But why even bank on luck when you have that networking in place already? And that
Yes.
just that is the luck. It just gets your CV like
It's
lifted up.
it's controlled luck,
It's
that's
controlled
how I
luck.
see it,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
for me as a tutor, if I could just get this one last point out, it's
yeah,
it's a
for
bit
sure.
it's a bit like this not it's a bit disarming for me to say like it's not like okay, don't care about what happens in class, don't care about your grades, do care about your grades,
Right.
maintain decent grades, but don't let them be the end all of everything,
The be all end all,
be
yeah.
all end all of everything. Don't let that be it.
100%.
Like take time to socialize, join these clubs and societies, build your network. That is something that the university provides, but it's not communicated. People don't know
Yeah,
that's so
it's not
important.
on paper.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
and I'm so glad you brought that up though, because I am very passionate about this. And whenever people, okay, it's not like everyone's asking me, oh, what's Jensen's
Mhm.
opinion on university? I'm not a counselor whatsoever. But when I do get into these discussions with my friends or my girlfriend, what I always say is, for sure, it's class, right? You go to class, it's not identical to school, but it's school. But that's not the only thing it is, because essentially it is this hotspot where a lot of companies love to recruit straight from universities, and that's where internship programs, that's what they are, I'm guessing. um, so there is so much opportunity outside of just class exams and grades, that the only way I believe you can make paying a lot of money for university worth it is if you take this opportunity to network, to join these clubs. And even if you meet nobody at the club, you can still, oh, this is my hobby, this is my interest, I got to explore it. So I agree 100%. And going back to nepotism, honestly, nepotism only sucks when you're on the other side of it.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, no one has ever hated nepotism when it benefits them. So hey, if it's there, take it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We
Um.
we we want that perfect world where it's very arbitrary, that it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But I would say like that is more in academia. In academia, yes, like contacts will get you somewhere, but if you really aren't the best of the best, they don't even look at you.
Oh, okay.
But in the private sector, they are more favorable towards the known factor.
Right.
Sometimes over skills, but of course, the bare minimum that they need is like, you still need to meet those requirements.
100%.
But then, yeah, it is a factor. It is a factor that I don't think you can avoid,
Right.
but you can definitely sort of like play into an ethical version of it, right? It's not unethical to make friends who go on to work at these companies. Not
Oh yeah.
unethical to, in fact, networking is a part of the business culture,
Yeah,
part of the
exactly.
business life. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's playing the game by the rules, you know?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, so in academia, well, to follow up on what you just told me, um, so in academia, the power of well, not the well, the power of nepotism, so to speak, isn't as strong as in the working world, in the world of employment and all that.
How do I phrase this very delicately? It will get you it will get you to the interview, just like in the private sector it could.
Right.
But in academia, that's it, right? Whereas in the private sector, it's more like it will get you to the interview. And let's say you're lacking in maybe one or two things, but you're such a known factor and a known quantity, or maybe you wow them over with networking skills that you built in university
Right.
at that job interview. You learned like maybe when you were applying to that club or society to be the treasurer or the whatever, you had to go through an interview process. So you know how to kind of like, sell yourself well.
Yes.
So that matters a lot in the private sector. But in the academia side of things, it will get you to the front door, but that's it. Like
Right.
from there onwards, it really is like it's things like publications, previous job posting in terms of like teaching of units. Definitely in academia, we do the same thing in private sector in terms of juggling multiple things.
Yeah.
I thought PhD was only about research. No, it's about teaching. It's about publishing. It's about
Right.
industry engagement
Oh wow.
because there's no point us coming up with like dusty tomes, dusty books that no one's going to read, right?
Yeah.
We want to make something that the industry, or in the case of economics, the government, or like, can use.
Can actually use, yes.
So exactly, exactly. So it's an integral part. But when it comes to getting a job at a university, if it comes to like a pure academic side of things, they will look at your publications after you get to the front door, it's your publications. It's
Right.
your that is like first and foremost, how much can you pump out for this university?
Like
How
in
much more
terms of
research can you
research.
bring?
Right.
Exactly, exactly. And that kind of overrules any recommendation, any nepotism, like it just kind of dies away
Oh wow.
because like ultimately they need that over. So it will definitely maybe like, for example, if a friend of mine goes to another university, gets a job teaching there, and then he knows the head of his department, and the head of his department is like, okay, we're looking for a political economist with a background in development economics. They'll be like, oh, I know Framjee from Monash University Malaysia.
Right.
And I know he's looking for a job. So they'd be like, okay, well, ask him to submit his CV. But then after that, it's like that's out of the equation. Now it's like, okay, what are my publications? What is my research? What have I been engaging in? Do I have like it is very, very nitty-gritty to that. Um, I think in the private sector it's still there, but companies are more willing to kind of like, okay, there's we noticed a few gaps, but that's fine. We can teach it to you.
Yeah.
You can a few, maybe you shadow someone and you can get by, at least in the early stages.
Right.
Whereas in academia, there's no shadowing. There's no we can teach it to you. You should already have been, kind of like learning this.
Right. So in academia, all it gets you is a knock on the door.
A
Whereas
knock on the door.
in the private sector, they're willing to maybe not overlook it, but they're willing to compromise. Like, oh, we can't have everything. So, well, you're good at this A, B, C is your strength. We'll teach you D and E.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
For both, it's not really, yeah, the nepotism is kind of there, but like with the private sector, it can get you much further than it can in academia. I think
Compared to
that's what I'm trying
academia.
to, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Would you then say it's fair because academia essentially you are so integral to the process of generating new prospects that yeah, so would you say it's fair that nepotism, well, or just favoritism, or no, let's not use nepotism. Let's just say networking. Would you
Networking, yeah.
say it's fair that networking only gets you to the interview in academia because your role as an educator is to create future generation prospects?
Mm. So it's like an inescapable part, I would feel, of both academia and the private sector. Like because it's people running this, right? At the end of the
Right.
day, when you join academia, you're not just creating research, you're also part of that department or that school.
Right.
So, for example, Department of Economics or School of Management, So the fact that somebody knows you and recommends you already means that you are kind of going to fit into the team in some way, shape, or form. You're not going to be that
Right.
sole unit working
Right.
by themselves. Ultimately, it is still an organization, it is still a business, right? Academics don't work for free, right? That would be
100%.
like, yeah, we would need some scientific society of like
Yeah.
unbelievable standards to work for free, not have to worry. It's still a business. It's still a
Right.
business. So I think it's yeah, it does create. I'm not sure. I can't 100% say like it's fair in terms of like because some universities, it is who you know that kind of gets you to the front door over others.
Right.
Yes. But I will say the process that follows after that is quite fair because that's where, like I said, all that favoritism like stops.
Right.
Um, Usually the panel that's hiring you and not be in any way, shape, or form, uh, you know, have worked with you in the past and things like that. It's usually like the topmost level of the university that's hiring you,
Oh wow.
you know?
Okay.
Whereas in the private sector, and the possibility of that happening is quite low, like you knowing that topmost level of the university. Whereas in the private sector, still rare, but there's a chance, like, the
It
person
definitely can
who,
happen.
yeah, exactly. And the person who recommended you could be in HR themselves.
Yeah.
So, because in the private sector, very much so, it is like we want you to be a part of the team, we want you to be a part of the organization, we want you to gel well. But at the university level, while that is still a factor,
Right.
like I said earlier, it's that research, it's that production. So I think yes, there is a question of is it fair or not? It has like pros and cons. There are arguments for and against it in getting to the interview because yes, definitely someone who's done an amazing job in their PhD, created some great research, but never took the time to network. They might be very obscure. Like people might be like, "Oh, but your research is great," but like you never took the time at these conferences, at all of these like seminars to like go and talk to people,
Yeah.
talk to them. So they know maybe of your research, but you might be the second or third author, and then they're like, "Oh, who's this guy? Like, we know he's
Right.
there, but we don't know him,
Right.
so no one's gonna recommend you and stuff like that." So over there, I guess the arguments to say that it's fair is that okay, it shows that if you would network, if you spend time building that social network, that you are a team player. It communicates that earlier, that you are
Yes.
somebody who can work with other people. Of course, though against it, you could say like the person who did not spend time building that network was probably doing research, was probably really focused in what they do and what they love, and they also deserve an equal shot.
Yeah.
Which is where the whole impartial like structure of the following interview kind of comes in to balance it all out. Like, okay, the networking guy versus the guy who didn't network. Like, how do they actually perform? Like in terms of research, let's get down to the brass tacks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say in academia it's more on that. Whereas in the private sector, you don't necessarily have to have done research and things like you don't need to have like an article with your name on it that somebody can go and check and be like, oh, this is what he did. This is exactly what he did. You
Right.
know, it's more of a recommendation. Okay, we can call your previous employer. We can ask them, how did you feel? And if you made a good impression, your employer is going to give the good, right?
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
probably
usually
gloss
a
over the
good
bad.
forecast of your ability, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If if your employer, your previous employer is a bit of a stickler, they might, give you the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But in academia, there's no hiding. It's there. It's a published paper. You go online, you read that person's research, you get an idea of okay, what did they do? Exactly what did they do? How did they come about it?
Right.
Like, yeah, it's a bit more transparent. Yeah, it's a bit more transparent in that sense.
Right.
So
Black and white in PDF form.
exactly. Kind of gets over the previous instances of nepotism or favoritism,
Yeah. Yeah. For
networking.
sure. Yeah. Okay. Wow. That is very insightful, and I don't think a lot of people have thought about that because I would I would just assume it's just another job. For sure, the job description is very different, but then every job is different to every other job. So it is very insightful, and I really appreciate that, Fram. It's very very, yeah, definitely insightful.
No worries. Glad to help. Glad to help with that.
Um, well, now moving on to the subject of economics, which in itself is a very very big package to unwrap. Could you summarize the concept, if there is a singular concept, of economics for the average person like myself, who almost failed his econs unit in his first year?
All right. To sort of summarize so the economics, ultimately, there's the principles of economics, right?
Yeah.
There's the understanding that, oh, there are scarce resources that need to be allocated as efficiently or as equitably as possible, you know?
Right.
So economics really revolves around this base question, right? Of course, if you ask someone else, they give you a much better answer, but this is my personal understanding of economics,
Of
right?
economics, yes.
Yeah. So it's like the understanding of how to best allocate scarce resources amongst people, right?
Right.
And economics really, that's where economics like divulges, like strays away from like the just the pure financial accounting perspective of money and like business, because we are more concerned with people. If you look at a lot of research articles in economics, and some of the previous Nobel Prize winners for economics, they're psychologists. Some of them are psychologists
Oh, okay.
because it revolves around people. It revolves around the study of people because ultimately the economy is a human construct. It
Right.
doesn't exist like that's why it's a social science and not a natural science, you know?
Right.
Without with or without people, there's going to be cells, there's going to be mitochondria, there's going to be gravity, there's going to
100%.
be hydrogen in the atmosphere, you know, all of that nitrogen, etc.
Yep.
But without people, there is no economy. It is a human construct, completely
Right.
human. And um, as a result, this entire thing revolves around the understanding of people. And therefore, even our understanding of, I think, like when it comes to money is different from finance and accounting, is that money is the tool that's used to allocate efficiently between the haves and the have-nots. You can definitely make arguments for allocating resources for those who don't have money, right? That is also welfare economics.
Yes.
So under the broad scope of economics, economics is primarily interested in allocating resources efficiently between the haves and the have-nots. Or it depends on how you look at it. Some people would say equitably, like fairly, but then
Right.
different questions come in. And it's the study of the economy. At the end of the day, it's the study of the economy, which is a human construct, which means it's the study of people as well that drive the economy. One of the
Right.
things we'll always say in economics is people are rational, right? People are rational. They're going to make these decisions based on rationality.
Yes.
Um, but people are rarely ever rational. When you actually work with the data, when you work with like, people on the ground in field surveys, you realize people are rarely ever rational. And that's because like, the real world is very complex.
Yeah.
It's a very complex thing. So as economists, we try to minimize this complexity. We try to simplify it. One thing you may have heard is like everyone going ceteris paribus, which means all things held constant. We try to simplify everything and we look at a simple model where all things held constant, how does one policy affect the economy as a whole?
Oh, meaning if you keep all the variables constant, we can study how X affects Z, for
Why?
example.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's very hard to do that. It's very in practice, it's very hard to do when you get into research. It's like, wow, like everything is changing. Like,
Yes.
inflation is on the rise, interest rates are changing, people are growing older, that affects their beliefs, that affects everything.
Yeah.
So as a result, like economics, kind of like when you go into research, you realize there's so many fields and branches of economics. There's development economics, which is focused on developing nations, the economies of these developing nations.
Hmm.
There's political economics, which focuses on the interlink between politics and the economy, the government as a whole,
Right.
because the government makes decisions that profoundly impact the economy.
Right.
There's behavioral economics, which focuses on the very micro level on people and their own behaviors, their own how they change and stuff like that.
How they use
Um,
money as well.
Definitely, yeah. So one of
Right.
the things in behavioral economics is called a nudge. So a nudge is when we encourage you to change your behavior subtly without forcing you to change your behavior. For example, the best example I can think of is like stairs. We'll put a sign like oh, if you walk up the stairs, you'll burn X number of calories. And that
Yeah.
kind of creates in people's minds, oh, if I take the stairs, I can, be a bit more fit.
Yeah.
And so you get people to take this. Or you could say like, oh, if you use the stairs, you save this much electricity instead of taking the lift. And then
Right.
people think like, oh, right, actually it's good for the environment, it's good for all of that. So like, yeah, that's one very interesting field of research in economics, which focuses on how people behave and stuff. And so
Mm.
with terms of money, like if you provide money to rural families in Bangladesh to send their kids to school, does that increase the amount of or at least the amount of time that their kids actually spend in school? Because what happens is without the additional payment of money, they may be like, okay, you don't need to go to school today because we need help on the farm or with the
Yeah.
family business. But if you provide money, they're like, oh, maybe I now have money so I can send this kid to school, prioritize their
Yeah.
education.
There's
Is
a
that actually
possibility that that need is satisfied and they might be able to send their kids to school.
exactly,
Right.
exactly? And then there's that, what are the long-term outcomes? So this is something that we study, like in behavioral economics, like how do you influence people's behavior with regards to using money or with regards to just money in general, like saving money if you take the stairs or whatever.
Mm.
And
Surely surely this is then related to psychology.
definitely, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of quite a few, not a lot, but quite a few Nobel Prize winners in economics are
Psychologists.
psychologists.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And yeah, it's a very interesting field of study because it has so many branches, even environmental economics, which focuses on this is where I always confuse with ecological economics, but hopefully I do a good job. Basically, it's the interplay of the biosphere with the economy. So basically, the biosphere is the world that we live in terms of the air we breathe, the sea, the land, and everything, and how that affects the economy. Because I think in Malaysia, this is very important. For example, if you look at Penang,
Right.
right now there's the Penang Reclamation Project, right? They want to build three islands. It was three islands, now it's one island in the south of Penang.
Right.
And like a lot of the farmers, I mean, not farmers, the fishermen in Penang are like, look, this is a natural inlet where you want to build this island is a natural inlet where we get so many fish,
Yeah.
that we provide to not just Penang, but the mainland as well.
Yeah.
And then economists were kind of like, okay, how do we come in and we can come in and quantify it. Like, look, the amount of fish that you bring in, what's the revenue? You come and build this island
Right.
and you put properties on it that that foreigners can come and invest in. That's foreign direct investment. So which revenue
Yes.
is higher? Like spoiler alert, it's the islands, right? But
Unfortunately for the
it
fishermen.
seems it seems so straightforward on paper, right? Like
Yeah.
you would understand why the government would pursue that. Like, but then you also need to think, oh, what happens when you build that island? For one, you need to dump a huge amount of sand,
Into
and
yeah.
that doesn't stay in one place. Sand just if you've ever dropped a bucket of sand in a pool, you see it just spread out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a localized event. It spreads throughout Penang. That affects the quality of the water. When
Yeah.
the quality of the water goes down, the turbidity levels and all of that, you have tourism in Batu Ferringhi, which might decrease because tourists come and see like ugly water and they're like, I might as well go to Tioman or Redang.
Yeah.
And now you have revenue on, the tourism side decreasing because no one's coming to Penang for the beautiful beaches. They're
Right.
coming to maybe buy property. So what is that loss in revenue? How do you calculate that? Maybe further down south, because of this like increase in like land, what is it, in water displacement, the mangroves are now, and mangroves in Penang have mostly been cleared, are now even more flooded, and that can lead to flooding in the future. What's the economic value of a mangrove? How much
Right.
of how much of water retention does a mangrove provide? These are questions in economics, environmental economics, that it's very hard to solve. It's very hard to quantify how important the environment is. Very easy to say, look, fishermen bring in this much revenue for Penang. Foreign direct investors buying property, this much revenue. You make that comparison, it's like, okay, done and dusted, easy.
But they
But then
study the
there's so much.
chain reaction.
They study the extra additional things that happen in terms of environment, valuing
Yes.
environmental services, valuing the costs to the rest of the island in terms of like overall. So these are very important questions
Wow.
that economics strives to answer. The only thing that limits us is data. If you have data, you can do so much. If you don't have data, you can't do anything. But like,
Right.
yeah, that is it. And I think you asked at the beginning. I know I made economics I tried to make it simple, but then I just divulged into everything. I hope it's not too. convoluted.
I think you definitely made it simple though. It's just it's such a big thing, right? Because I know when
Yeah.
I was typing out this question that honestly I wouldn't say it's a good question because it is a very loaded question. But I
Oh,
thought about it multiple times and I I want to start off with this so that we can then break down
mm.
into smaller and finer, more meticulous
Oh,
details.
that's
Um,
fine. That's fine.
yeah.
Like from me, when I was answering, I was like, oh, I know that there's a properly worded definition of economics that's very simple and very easy. But me myself, I've not been interested in memorizing the definition, so I just went with my own understanding.
I
So
love
maybe
that then.
somebody in your audience who is like, very into economics would be like, oh, what is he saying? He's saying like a lot of a lot of pieces.
That's not what it said here.
That's not what
You
it
know,
said. That's
yeah.
not what it said. Like, and I agree 100%. Like, I did not give a textbook. I gave my own personal understanding
Yeah.
of it. And I just dived into the more nitty-gritty nuances of economics and like how much it can like branch out.
Right.
So like that's what interests me. So I hope that answers the question without taking it too far away.
So my understanding from what you explained is economics is the study of the economy, and it is also the study. Well, it is mainly the study of the allocation of resources.
Exactly. So those resources could be, if you are the current government, do you go ahead with the reclamation project or do you postpone it indefinitely in favor of the fishermen?
Right.
Do you go ahead with the reclamation project? Do you allocate government funds towards the fishermen who now can't get as much fish as they used to?
Yeah.
You know, these are questions that economics tends to solve, or at least try
Right.
to give answers to. We can't really solve it, but we can give you the information that you need to come to an answer.
To make the decision as the government.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So if economics is the study of the economy, what is the economy? What itself? What does the word economy mean?
Oh, now you're forcing me to like really dive into my memory, which is very vague. So the economy, well, there is the macro and the micro economy, right? There is the macro economy, which is built up of the entire economy of the country and countries around it. So the economy is the markets, the firms, the services provided by all of these entities, right? You go down to the micro level, then you have households, you have individuals. So it's like the economy of a household would be uh, the income from the mother or the father who's working, and then, the different stakeholders in the household who are utilizing that income. You look at the macro level, it's like, oh, the imports, exports, the circular flow of income. It changes from in terms of if you look at it at a micro level and you look at it at a broader macro level. So the economy, if I was to like kind of like give an overall very vague, very I think
General.
I would barely even pass, I think, economics if I get this answer, is it is basically comprised of the firms, the individuals, the households, and the government itself that comprise a particular country. You could look at it as the global economy, the world economy, the country's economy, or even like households. But it is comprised of the entities that bring in money or bring in resources and allocate it amongst themselves. So if you look at like the Malaysian economy, it would be the firms that, the major firms in Malaysia. It would be the households in Malaysia, and it would be the
Right.
government
So it is made of anyone and everyone who interacts with the flow of resources within a space.
within a space. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That is my
Okay.
understanding of it. Of course, you go online, you could get a much better answer. You could get a much better answer than what I gave,
Well,
I
I
think.
mean, that might be true. I think we can Britannica anything and everything out there.
Mm.
But I think by asking you, it's always more contextualized, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the broader concept understanding, I would say, that I've come to terms with after like years of being in the field and like working through research.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is why, like, I think a lot of professors have a crisis of faith in the moment when you ask them, like, what is economics? And they've been focused on, like, development economics, environmental economics for years. And they're like, oh, wait, hold on. I learned
Because
this way back in the day. Yeah,
they've been focusing on the specificities of it, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Well, then, we talked about defining um, economics and the economy. what would you say are the most common misconceptions of what economics is?
I think the most common misconception is that, oh, economics is all about money. It's just
Right.
about um, the money. But actually, no, the money is just a means of allocating resources. You do have monetary economics, which deals with that. That's like, your Bank Negara looks into those kinds of things, interest rates and everything
National
like
Bank,
that.
yeah.
Exactly. There's financial economics that looks into that. But as a whole, economics really just views money as like a means of allocating resources.
Right.
The misconception that people, or the thing that people don't really notice about economics, like I mentioned earlier, is it's actually a study of the people, the driving
Right.
factors behind the economy, right? Because it's very easy to say like, oh, let's bring in automation, let's bring in like robots, let's bring in farm equipment that's autonomous. So
Right.
then the farmers and the factory workers who are out of a job, they can just relearn, right? They can just learn a better. They can work in the white collar services, right?
Oh,
In the
right.
service sector, they can
Yeah.
get a job as an accountant or a financial person or whatever, right? But does that really happen? Like, does that actually happen? You go to a farm in like where in like Sabah or like Sarawak, you give them like autonomous equipment, and then they're like out of a job, and you're like, okay, now just learn how to become an
Just
accountant or
yeah, become a lawyer. Just do
become a
it.
lawyer, become a
Yeah.
doctor. Like, yeah, this is your calling. Like, no, it doesn't happen like that, right? So that's where economics steps in. Like, okay, the understanding of how do people actually, interact with the policies that you make, with the changes in the economy. When inflation goes up, what happens to consumer spending? That's a big question in economics. Like Bank Nagar is always trying to figure that out, like to see how that happens. They have an idea, obviously, but
Right.
how does
So
that affect it?
in that case, you're focusing on the behavior of people when it comes to resources.
Exactly, exactly. More
Okay.
than just about pure money. Definitely, there is monetary economics, financial economics, which delves into interest rates, exchange rates, and how that affects the value of the currency, etc. Like
Right.
bonds, long-term bonds, how that affects, like those are there. That is a very specific branch of economics. But economics as a whole isn't just about the money. It's about allocation of resources. There's several principles of economics, 6 to 7, if I remember correctly. I should
Right.
remember this correctly. I've been teaching microecon for a while, but just like my students, it just keeps like evaporating from my head
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
And
That's fair.
because the one issue with these principles is they're not absolute. The more you do research, the more you realize it's not absolute. We tell rational people will act in a certain way. Rational people respond to incentives, you know.
Right.
But to begin with, people aren't always rational. So the incentive that you give, you can never 100% anticipate how people are going to react to it.
React to it. Yes.
Exactly. So the misconception that people who even take economics have is that, oh, these principles are constant. All things constant, this policy should work. That's assuming all things are constant. Nobody can
Right.
predict a war with Russia,
Russia and
the
Ukraine. Yeah.
Russo-Ukrainian war. No one can predict the ongoing genocide in Gaza. No
Yeah.
one can predict these things. So, sorry, those are two, I think, politically loaded quotations, but hopefully
Well,
your
that's
audience.
real life context, though. That is real
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, no one can predict these things. So all things held constant, does that actually add value? Like, because you can't really say that the world economy is going to be constant.
Right.
So these are kind of like the misconceptions that people have when it comes to economics. They think it's all about money. They forget that it's actually about the people and the allocation of resources to these people. And I think the people who also take economics also kind of forget, like, all right, it's also some of the things that we say, like people are rational, all things are constant, are
Yeah.
not true. It's an
Right.
assumption. It's an assumption, but it's not true.
Well, I think a light way of looking at this misconception is going back to how Asian parents want us to be, the best of the best, get a job that brings a lot of money and a lot of
Mm,
respect and honor to the family. I think not for all, surely not for all, but I'm sure there definitely are students out there who maybe their parents thought, hey, you're in the field of business. Business has to do with money. If you're around money, surely you'll make a lot of money. Surely you'll
hmm
you'll just deal with money. But this is the misconception now that you're telling me, and I think I'm definitely one of those people who subscribe to, oh, economics is just money, because I always associated economics, finance, and banking as not the same, but definitely very similar, or at least
Mm.
underneath the same umbrella.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like the misconception because the in economics we don't just look at a firm. If you're in finance, if you're in accounting, you're looking at firms. You're really just looking at firms, you know. What is the bottom line? What are the, profits, losses, the net income, etc.
Yeah.
But in economics, you're not just looking at firms, you're looking at households, you're looking at the government, you're looking at the whole economy, all of these things which comprise the economy. You're not just focused on the financial, on the firm side of things.
Right. So you're looking at things from all scales, really. It could be small scale. How does
Exactly.
one single person, well, not just spend money, but how do they interact with the resources around them? But then you could also look at it from a global scale, or from a country, perspective. How does
Exactly. Yeah.
Malaysia, what resources does Malaysia have, and how does Malaysia, for example, allocate its resources to its people? And then
Exactly.
going back to the example with the fishermen and with the land reclamation projects, does the government approve of the land project, or do they go with, hey, we have done our analysis and I think we can hold back on the project for now and prioritize the fishing industry, for example, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And definitely, like, it's very easy, I think, as someone who's not in economics to who looks at like government decisions and goes like, oh, it's just the government making another bad decision, or
Yeah.
oh man, I can't understand why the government does that. But if you study macroeconomics, you would be like, okay, right, kind of makes sense why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
You know, for example, like when it comes to the ringgit, for example, I think a lot of Malaysians always complain the ringgit is devaluing, I think, yeah, depreciating against the dollar,
Right.
but it's depreciating by like what, 50 cents? It's
Right.
like it used to be $1 was like 3 ringgit. Now it's like 3 ringgit 50 cents or something like that. I don't know
Right.
the exact specific value. But then when you think about it in a macroeconomic perspective, it means that your exports are now cheaper. Sure, by 50 cents. But like when you multiply that by, thousands of metric tons of exports, it means Malaysian exports are cheaper.
Right.
And for a country like the US or whoever, like Malaysia's trading partners, it means that Malaysian imports are cheaper. So therefore, you're gonna see an increase on some level in terms of exports. So it makes Malaysia more competitive in the global industry,
Right.
right? So it's very easy to look at one tiny thing and go like, oh, all right, that's just awful. But there's a hidden layer, or there's a chain reaction on like another event that's occurring that is also a benefit as well. So
Right.
from the government's perspective, they're always making decisions, and you hope that they are fully informed about what that decision has.
Yeah.
But everyday people may not necessarily, without it. That's why I say like most people should give macro and microeconomics a go to
Right.
kind of like just understand like how the whole kind of like country runs, like what happens, like what are the impacts and things like that. Of
Right.
course, there's going to be issues for Malaysia as well, when it's 3 ringgit 50 cents now or something like that. It becomes more expensive to import stuff like chicken. Everybody eats chicken,
Yes.
but those chickens need to be fed to be slaughtered eventually. But you need to bring down food, right, to feed them. And
Yeah.
that's not grown in Malaysia. That's usually grown in Ukraine, cereal and stuff like that.
Right.
That becomes more expensive, which is why the cost of your chicken goes up as well.
Right. So you're
You
always
know,
looking at cause and effect.
you're always looking at what is driving this. Okay, this is what's driving it. It could be some abstract thing like the war in Ukraine, but it's like having a profound impact on your day-to-day expenses.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that is
That's
quite a lot to unpack. To
to
unpack
unpack
for
that.
sure.
Yeah, that is why I think a lot of people are driven away from economics as well. It depends on, that's why we specialize when it comes to research. But
Yeah.
if you look at it as a whole, it's very broad. There's a lot to think about, a lot to consider.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, well, you talked about money, and I think one thing that I've definitely learned today is it's not just about money. But we do know that economists define money. But how would you say they do so, and what is their influence on money?
Hmm. In terms of money, over here, I don't know how qualified I am to answer this because I'm not a monetary economist, but I know like in terms of general understanding, there's like fiat money, which is the money that can be like that's the cash that you hold in hand.
Yes.
And then there's like I think the more credit debit related like money, like in terms of like how much do you have as loans or how much do you have as like, how much are you owed and things like that.
Right.
So economists look at money. I think over here you would be better informed by a monetary economist. But when we look at money, we look at things like from my monetary economics 101 course back in the day, what I understood is we're looking at things like, okay, like what is affecting the value of the money. So the value of the money that you have in your pocket right now is not going to be the same next year or
Yes.
maybe even by the end of this year because of inflation, right?
Right.
Inflation is a persistently annoying thing that's just gnawing at the way of
Always there.
your always there, right? During our parents' time, like what nasi lemak was like three, two by or back home in Sri Lanka, a packet of rice was like $3 or $4 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I think even less. Now it's like you'd be lucky to find nasi lemak for like 8 ringgit, 10 ringgit, you know?
Yes. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
our
It
parents'
breaks my
time they
heart.
could buy a house. It breaks everyone's heart.
Yeah.
Like that's like the minor level. Our parents' time they could buy a house easily
Yeah.
and not bust the bank. The mortgage would not haunt them till the end of their days.
Yeah.
It was very doable. But now because the value of money has steadily decreased over time, that's what economists are always acutely aware of is inflation.
Right.
Every year the value of your money is going to depreciate every year, whether you like it or not.
Meaning we need more money to buy the same thing, even if that same
Exactly.
thing retain its value.
Yeah, there's something known as the consumer price index, which is basically a basket of goods and services that if you look at Malaysia, every Malaysian needs to buy. And
Right.
this is something the that Bank Negara looks at very like carefully, like how much money do you need to buy? Like how much is that, increase? We know it's increasing, but is it
Right.
increasing like really quickly or is it increasing, gradually? Is it decreasing? That's a bit weird. It does happen, but these are things. So there's things like inflation, there's deflation, there's stagflation. These are things that economists pay attention to. Another thing that affects the value of your money, because ultimately we are concerned with the value of money, right? Whether you're a financier or an accountant or whatever,
Yeah.
you are concerned with the value of the money that you have. Another thing that affects it is, interest rates, yield rates, bond rates. These things also affect the value of the money in your hand.
Right.
So, and especially the returns that you get, right? So interest rate has an effect on inflation. I do not remember the exact relationship. I know that there is a full-on graph, I think that curve that works on this, but I cannot remember for the life of me right now how it works.
Right.
So that's another thing that economists also pay attention to. Um, and of course, the performance of the economy as a whole will affect the value of the money in your hand. If the
Right.
Malaysian economy is doing well, if they are robust, if they're strong, if there's a lot of tourism, if there's a lot of global exports, if Nanami in Jujutsu Kaisen name drops Kuantan, like that increases, tourism to
Yeah.
Malaysia. And that increases the demand for the ringgit.
Meaning the
More
value of
foreigners.
the ringgit goes up,
Exactly. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
and
So
and you need less of it to buy something of that stays the same value essentially.
yeah, so the demand for the ringgit goes up. I mean, I'm not saying it's absolutely happening, but basically what happens is the value of your ringgit increases. So then if you bring it back to that story about, oh, the chicken feed, now you can import the chicken feed for a lower price because now the value of the ringgit has gone up. So you're giving up
Right.
less ringgit. So then as a result, the value of the price of your chicken, everyday chicken, decreases. It'll
Right.
still probably go up like eventually over time, but if it's a sustained increase in tourism, you'll see like maybe 50 cent increases, ringgit increases. Whereas if it's like, nothing happens, tourism leaves, the flip happens, like tourism leaves Malaysia and, the value of the ringgit plummets, then you'll see like drastic increases. So these are things that economists look at with relation to money. There's a lot of things that affect money, the value of the money in your hand. Could be the inflation. performance of the economy, interest rates, bond yield rates. These are all like things that affect your money. So when monetary economists are thinking about the money,
Right.
they are thinking about all of these things in tandem. They are considering all these measures, and Bank Negara is primarily, I think, primarily responsible for this. So
Within
they
Malaysia.
are within Malaysia. And as a Sri Lankan, I would say they do an excellent job. And this is
Right.
not me just trying to like, I don't know, like secure brownie points or something with Malaysia, but as an economist, I would say they do an excellent job of really monitoring inflation,
Right.
monitoring exchange rates. They are not, and they're not, I would say they're not. So as a central bank, you can be very, very like, you can fix your exchange rates. You can do all kinds of stuff to really artificially manipulate the value of the money.
Right.
But Bank Negara doesn't do that. I'm pretty sure, so they allow it to float. I think it's right now it's floating, so which means it can vary. The exchange rate can vary based on market conditions, which is in economics, we thought that's ideal,
Right.
right? And they also do a very good job of like keeping inflation low, bringing
Right.
in various policies that keep inflation low so that everyday Malaysians are able to afford what they need.
So
But at the
costs of
same time,
things are quite constant.
they are quite constant over time. But one thing that I think is out of their control is yes, like, inflation is going to increase. It's not always a bad sign. That's one thing we learn in economics. I think that's maybe one misconception that people have is like
Yeah, go ahead.
economics, inflation is always a bad thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. There's something called demand-led inflation, demand-caused inflation, which is your economy is growing, and because your economy is growing, it's consuming more, it's producing more, so the cost of stuff goes up. But the idea is that while, that also means that jobs are hiring more people
Right.
because they need to produce more services, goods and services. They are hiring more people, which means these people are getting more, like more people are getting a salary, which means that these people can go and spend more, which means that other goods and services are now receiving more income, which means that they also need to increase, they've experienced an increase in demand, right? One man's spending is another man's income. So
Right.
they also need to increase their output, which means they hire more people. It causes a chain reaction,
So it's a greater circulation of money.
of money. It's like everyone's spending.
Right.
So that means that firms are also getting higher profits, higher revenues. So they realize, oh, there's an increase in demand. I need to increase my output. So I need more workers to
Right.
do that.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
I hire more people. Those people are now getting a salary. Those people now go and spend. And, it just creates this. So that does cause inflation because that means that, oh, increased demand. We always know when demand goes up, price of something will go up as well.
Right.
More people are out in the market, more people are out at the shopping malls, they're buying stuff. Firms are like, oh, this is great. We can hike up prices. People are actually coming and buying our stuff. So
Right.
this is the ideal inflation. This is what every economist hopes happens at a manageable pace, right?
Right. Okay. You.
But
If I look
yeah,
dumbfounded, it is because I am. Like I can
yeah.
see you actively pushing the walls of my brain, making them bigger. Okay, but
Let me know if I'm going too far. Yeah, yeah.
well, yeah, just to stop you right there and just to kind of push it back a little bit. So, my understanding of what you just said is as the prices of things go up. Okay, wait, I'm lost again.
Right, right. So the
Sorry about
idea
that.
is the no worries, no worries. This is great. So when the prices when inflation happens, it means the
Right.
value of your money kind of drops, right?
Yeah.
So people are like, that's bad. But there's a good side to it as well, which is if the economy is doing really well and people are buying more and people are spending more, that means more people are getting money, more businesses are getting money, they're hiring more people. That is a good side of inflation. So not all inflation is bad. It's not like a disease.
Yeah.
There's a good inflation. The only issue is we hope that, like I said earlier, you're spending more money, firms are receiving more money. We hope that they are hiring more people. What
Right.
we don't want to see is they're like, oh, we want AI to do this. We're going to hire like a abstracting like AI, or we're going to hire more people, but we're not going to pay them a good salary or a competitive wage.
Yeah.
Because then that stunts the process. What happens is, oh, from there, there's no one really earning more money.
So they
So
can't
the
afford.
prices they can't afford. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So this is where like this is it's a very so economics is complex. Like macroeconomics is very complex. But dialing it back to the question, what do economists think of when they look at the money? Is like they look at all of these things. How's the general performance of the economy? Is it good? Are people out and about? Are they spending? And are firms using this money to increase their output by hiring more people? That's
Right.
good. That's great. That's great. Because then, yeah, the price of stuff went up, but hey, you're employed, you have a job, maybe your salary went up. Maybe people
Right.
who are with the company for a long time, the company's like, wow, this is peak season. We're getting a lot of demand. We need
Right.
to keep you. Would you like a bonus? Would you like to what can we do to keep you? We increase your salary.
Right.
So if your salary, your wage matches the increase in inflation, then economists are like, okay, we don't really need to worry too much.
And
But
is sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just to finalize it, it's like, but if the value of like if inflation is going up, but the value of your salary isn't rising, then it's like, oh no, you can't afford the stuff that you need. That's bad.
Right.
That's when economists are like, okay, we need to do something about that.
Right. So if a country's economy is booming and doing really well,
Hmm.
people have money to afford things. This
Mm.
means that demand for things will go up, and we know that supply has to balance with demand for, I forgot like the ideal situation or
Profit
whatever it
maximize.
is.
You want to maximize from a firm's point of view, you want to maximize profits because
Right.
imagine you sold out for the day, but there's still like 50 customers outside, and you're like, oh my God, I could have
I
made
could have made more. Yeah.
so much more money. From an economist standpoint, you're like, oh, it's good for society as a whole because now customers are getting what they want. Uh, we want what is it called? Social max optimization. But for
Right.
firms, it's just I could have made more money. So that's
Right.
why supply would increase with demand.
Right. So, okay, so if a country's economy is booming and doing really well, people have the money to afford things and to buy things. Therefore, demand increases, and firms will match that with increasing output so that supply matches demand. And by doing so, they need to hire, well, the ideal is that they hire more people and incentivize people to work by maybe increasing wages. And inflation happens because more money would essentially enter the circulation.
Yeah, because basically now, because anyway, when you produce more, you're going to have higher costs.
Yeah.
You're hiring more workers, you're getting more machines. So that causes the cost of the good itself to rise. And they know that people are willing to pay for that because demand went up, right? People
Yeah.
really want that product. So this general increase throughout the economy causes inflation. So this is known as demand-led inflation or demand-caused inflation.
Right.
So it's a good thing in a way. It's that people want more and firms need to give them more, so they're increasing prices to be able to handle that increased demand. So why do people want more? They may have better salaries, they may be earning better or whatever, and that is like the nice thing that we like to see in economic, like demand-led inflation.
Okay.
There is a yeah, there are countless forms of inflation. There are worse ones, but yeah, I won't confuse you with the details.
All right. All right. Okay. So, oh wow. So that really does answer. Sorry. I think that really clears a doubt in my mind because I think myself along with pretty much everyone out there. Every time you go out, if you take a Grab, if you take an Uber, the driver is going to complain about inflation, driver is going to complain about things becoming more expensive.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
okay, wow, that is very fascinating. And, continuing on this topic of inflation and economical problems that, we face in our everyday life, there are countries such as, Egypt, well, Sri Lanka, and Ukraine who are currently facing economic crises. And, for example, Ukraine suffered a 30 to 35% loss of its GDP at the start of the Russo Ukraine conflict. What is a possible solution that you can propose to reinstate Ukraine into its former economic status?
I mean, there's a very simple solution on paper, very simple solution, which is end the war. End the war like today, tomorrow, yesterday, just end the war.
Right.
And because anything that you want to, I think the question was just so that I understand it properly is how do we help Ukraine back onto its feet, right? How do
Yes.
we develop it to where it used to be. The war needs to stop. Like as so, one of the interesting branches of economics is conflict economics, economics of conflict.
Oh wow.
There's a very growing literature on that. And but I mean, you don't even need to be in conflict economics to know that there's no point in investing money in Ukraine to because how do you make the economy grow? Once again, you need businesses, you need people to, so normally the idea would be you invest in like, oh, I want to invest in this Ukrainian firm, but what's the point if tomorrow it gets struck by a Russian cruise
Yeah.
missile?
Yeah.
That's my investment down the drain.
Yeah.
So for foreign investors, Ukraine is not a viable investment opportunity because war creates so much uncertainty.
Yes.
The factory that you employ several workers may be gone the next day,
Right.
you know? So that causes people to not put in much foreign direct investment into Ukraine. That causes the demand for the Ukrainian, is it the Ukrainian ruble? I actually don't know their currency, but that causes the demand for the currency to fall, which makes it hard for Ukraine to import stuff.
Right. Because everything
Definitely
becomes exponentially more expensive.
more expensive.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So you would, and generally, like the moment the government has to rebuild a building, the moment the government has to, and you can rebuild a building, right? It is expensive for the government budget, but you can do it.
Yeah.
But the people that die, the innocent Ukrainian civilians that die, you can't rebuild a person, you can't buy back a person, you
Yeah.
know? So as a result, like that is a huge, like that you cannot even calculate in economics. Like what is the loss of human capital? Because that kid that died could have been grown up to be the next finance minister, or it could have been
Right.
like, the central bank of Ukraine's governor, or
Yeah.
maybe it could have been a scientist that discovered something for Ukraine. Like these are, you cannot even calculate, even if that person was alive and they grew up, you cannot like calculate the value that they have given to the economy,
Right.
but they definitely do. We know, like conceptually, they do. So, on a broad level, like ending the war, right? You could make the argument that because Ukraine is having its own defense industry,
Right.
like they are building drones, they are building equipment. You could invest in that, but I don't really see it as like a viable. It's not like the US. It's not like UK and all that, which have very big industries like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and all of these like big industries that are
Yeah.
involved in the war effort that make so much money that they provide it to a government that's already doing really well,
Right.
right? Like USA and UK. Ukraine is a wartime economy, which is I think currently receiving tremendous funding from I think I may need to fact check this. I believe the IMF is providing them funding, or some organizations are providing them funding.
Right.
And generally, I guess like if you want like a small manageable solution, it would be like ensuring freedom of passage through the Black Sea, because that's where Ukraine ships out most of its grain,
Yeah.
most of its corn, most of its cereals, which the world needs. Like Malaysia has it kind of bad because we can't feed chickens with it, and then the cost of chicken feed goes up, the
Yeah.
cost of chicken goes up. But Africa, which several countries in sub-Saharan Africa, they can't grow most of their own food, and they need to import it from Ukraine. And the less of it there is, the fall in supply causes an increase in price. So Malaysia can kind of hunt, it can kind of manage. But
Yeah.
like sub-Saharan Africa, like oh my God, like you're creating a hunger crisis there. So a short solution would be bring up the Black Sea, letting these grain exports go with no hindrance would
Right.
benefit not just Ukraine, but the world economy.
Right.
Um, but ending the war as a whole, like, Russian oil it might stop being blacklisted, which would mean the general price of oil would decrease. I know Malaysians are quite sheltered from it, but around the world, the price of oil has just been rising.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse with the current situation in the Red Sea. I think the strait between Yemen and Oman
Right.
because of the attacks. Um, so yeah, like if you want a simple solution, like an immediate solution, it's end the war. That would
Yeah.
solve
For sure.
almost all of both Ukraine and Russia's economic wars.
Right. But that would solve a
But
lot of issues, right? Not just from an
yes,
economical
yes,
standpoint. It's like, yeah, it should have
everything. Yeah,
happened.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It should have happened, but is a very politically complex thing that's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
I guess the small solutions that you can see are basically I guess like yeah, allowing the Black Sea to be open again to allow for I mean to be truly open because I think right now there's like it's a bit iffy. I think the situation over there is a bit
Right.
uncertain. Um, I think aside from that, it would also be um, well, this is an unethical solution, but I guess countries that are seeking to expand their military or to expand their defense capacity could start buying Ukrainian drones
Right.
because Ukraine's really ramped up its drone production. They need it for the war effort, but arguably, I think they can spare some to bring in foreign direct investment. Investing in the Ukrainian defense industry. As if you are an investor, an angel investor with cash, maybe you could invest in the Ukrainian defense industry. But what is your return on investment? Questionable because
Yeah.
the I think everyone knows that Ukraine hasn't had a very successful offensive at the moment. So
Right.
yeah, it's very tricky. Like right now, it feels like the US and all the partner nations are just kind of pumping money in, but there's no real gains. And that's not Ukraine's fault by any means. It's they are going up against the world's third largest army, and I think
Yeah.
one of the most technologically capable. So
Yeah. One of the
it's very
superpowers for
tricky.
sure.
Exactly, it's a full on superpower, it's a nuclear
Yeah.
superpower. So this is a very tricky. Yeah, there's no easy solution. There's no blanket solution. There is one, but it would never happen, which is the ending of the war, which would
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah. But that's like my take. I think from my perspective.
Right. So, allowing, well, as you can see, as you said, making sure that the Black Sea is fully open and safe for the inflows and outflows of resources, right? So that is a trade route that is very very important to not just Ukraine, but the rest of the world as well.
Precisely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that is from an economical standpoint.
That
One.
is humanitarian, economic. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it's a good source of revenue for. I mean, what is it? It's a good source of foreign income
Right.
for Ukraine because countries buy this grain, and Ukraine needs that money to obviously sustain its war efforts by itself.
Right.
So, and genuinely for countries outside of Ukraine, like Malaysia, like, I mean, sub-Saharan African countries are absolutely being, suffering, you would avert so many hunger crises. You would improve the economic situation on so many countries. Because, yeah, as an development economist, I can tell you there is nothing more horrifying to a country than when the price of food goes beyond your means.
Yeah.
Countries like Sri Lanka, which were once on a path of really good development, when food prices skyrocketed, when everything skyrocketed, we took to the streets. Like I wasn't there personally, but the Sri Lankan people took to the streets. Like it causes political instability. It causes loss of foreign direct investment, loss of income. So, and rightfully so, like people are angry. People deserve to be angry if they can't afford their day-to-day necessities, right?
Exactly. It should be basic. It should
It
be it
should be
should be
basic.
given.
Exactly. So this war has so many profound impacts around the world that it makes it very, very difficult, I think, uh, for every economy actually to function. The only economies I would say that are benefiting from these are economies that also export grains and cereals, aside from Ukraine, because now people have
Right.
to,
Rely on only
import
them.
only them. The defense industries of the US and UK, France, these guys are doing great because like right now they have to ramp up production, which means they need more workers
To support
uh,
Ukraine.
to support Ukraine. Yeah,
Yeah.
because this is I don't think a lot of people realize, but this is a global economy that's seen peace, relative peace for a while now. So a lot of these countries during World War II, which were able to like pump out tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition in a week, day, I think. Right
Yeah.
now, they can barely even get that number out in a month, and Ukraine needs that in a day.
Wow.
So when you get into the logistics of it, yeah, like these countries are, I mean, these companies, these industries in these countries are doing well because now they have to start ramping up numbers, which means more income for them. Yeah,
Well, whether we like it or not, and I find it quite unfortunate, it is their time to shine. Like these weapons companies and all that.
Yeah. Arguably, yeah, that's true. And if anything, right now I feel like they're just giving like old stockpiles, but that also means that the US needs to start investing
Restocking,
more
right?
in like in restocking its own, yeah, its own
Yeah.
old stockpiles, which means a lot more money is going to go into research and development of like new systems and all of that. We are entering, I think, a new age where it's going to become autonomous. Warfare is going to soon become autonomous.
Right.
So that means an infinitely higher amount of expenditure in research and development.
Right. Well, moving on to your philosophy on money, because I remember when, um, well, I so to say pitched the podcast to you on the phone. It was, I wanted to talk to you about how you see money as well, not just from, definitely from an economist point of view, but personally as well. How do you view money? What is your relationship with money, etc. So there is a podcast host, Leo Skepi. I don't know if I said his name correctly. I hope I did. He talks about how money is a tool that allows us to access things that we need or want. And whether this is, maybe shelter, maybe food, which are our necessities, or something that just allows us to feel like we have a good quality of living, right? A good standard of living. And of course, I'm not talking about, oh, let's throw away money for this limited Jordans or, this big 3-story mansion that we do not need because, according to him, he does not believe that that is everyone's calling in life,
Yeah.
you know? Maybe for some people, maybe for your Paris Hiltons of the world, luxury is your purpose, but it definitely isn't the purpose of everybody. And ultimately, money is a tool that gives us access to the things that will make us feel good. It also gives us a sense of safety and peace. And he also encourages us to prioritize having money for rent, right? Having savings for rent and multiple months, and also having money in accounts for ourselves. So that is a lot to unpack there, and I do apologize for that. But what is your opinion on this perspective of let's use money as a tool to make sure we have enough, not just for our necessities, but for our happiness as well?
So yeah, this guy from the podcast, I almost 100% agree with it. Almost like
Right.
100%. I have a very similar philosophy. So when I was in undergrad, I did management as one of my majors. And one concept that's introduced in management is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which
Yes.
is like a simple. I think everyone kind of knows this, right? Anyone with
Yeah.
intro to management will also know this. You have your base needs, which are safety, security in terms of like a roof over your head,
Yeah.
food,
Shelter.
water, shelter, exactly. And then you go a little bit higher. I think you need a few more like social stuff. There's like social constructs, friends, family, and then you go even higher. You have like I think personal stuff, and then yeah, you go to the very top, which is like acquiescence,
Actualization.
the
Yeah.
actualization. There you go. Yeah. Sorry about the background. I'm near a highway.
Oh, you're all
Um.
good.
All right. All right. So at the base levels, yes, when you are starting off with maybe in a new country or maybe you just started earning, you're very focused on those base needs, which is 100% you should do that. You should have money to eat. You should have, because ultimately every human being on earth should have money to eat, to get access to clean and safe water, and they should have enough money to have a roof over their heads as well,
Right.
shelter. So keeping money aside for rent is very important. If you are renting, it's very important. Thinking about 2 to 3 months, because that's a very good point that a lot of people don't think about is people live paycheck to paycheck. They're forgetting if you need to move apartments, then that means you need to have a deposit, right? Which is
Yes.
about 3.5 months worth of rent. And you're not always going to get the deposit of your old apartment back as fast as they expected you to pay. They might take time.
Yeah.
And who knows, your landlord might walk in, notice a scratch on the wall, and deduct money from that deposit. So you should not be depending on that deposit before going to look for a new, if you are moving to a new apartment, right? When it comes to food, Malaysia really tests this because Malaysia has excellent food and from every price range.
Yeah.
You could walk into Jalan Aloy and easily drop like 70 ringgit, 100 ringgit. Or you could spend one day in TRX or one day in Pyramid or any of the malls
For
and
sure.
like 300 ringgit, you could go to Haidilao and just like, wow, that's 400 ringgit gone.
For sure.
Like, but
The
you will
entire
be
days
satisfied.
and yeah.
Exactly, exactly. You will be satisfied. But understanding that, okay, we are human and we have wants. Obviously, you will want to go and you will want to one day try out Haidilao. Lao. Maybe you want to go to TGIF. Maybe you want to go to Gordon Ramsay's restaurant, etc. But keeping aside money for that financial planning and discipline is what really helps you enjoy that even more. Like you eat clean or you eat like how you need to eat for the rest of the month, and then you keep aside money for that one expenditure. Um, and then, like definitely at that level, you should be seeing money as something which is carefully managed so that you have access to all three of those things: food, water, and shelter. And you don't face any insecurities. Because if you don't have those three, there's no point in advancing up the needs, right? There's
Yeah.
no point. Then when we move to the second level, which is I think friends and family, I really should get the pyramid out, I think, maybe on the side. Like money does have an ability to bring people closer to you, right? Or you can do fun stuff with the people that you love.
Yeah.
So um of course different people are going to have different needs. And I think first you need to know whether A, do those people's needs match the amount of money that I have. If your friends are like very, very, high end and they want to, that's not a bad thing. Like maybe that's just, their backgrounds, or maybe that's just how maybe they're earning really well and they want to spend it. If you try to match that, you are going to be miserable, you
Right.
know? You are going to be miserable. Maybe you can set a goal for yourself. You could spend time with people like this and set a goal for yourself. I want to earn as much as they do or better. That could be great. But if you are going to try to match them in terms of spending, you are going to be broke and you are going to be miserable and you're going to hate your situation, which is not good for you in the long run, right?
For sure.
Of course, like really good friends would be like, oh, we don't mind spotting you, or we don't mind eating at a place which is more like, mid to lower level. We don't mind that. And I think that's really important that people realize that you don't need to match your friends and family and all of that in terms of spending. You are your own person. You have your own goals. Spend within your means. But sure, one day if your friends want to go on that trip to Penang and you can afford it for 3 days and 2 nights or whatever, like yeah, sure, keep that money aside. Like it is a very good way to de-stress, spend time with the people that you love, go and make memorable experiences, travel the world and things like that.
Yeah.
But do not try and use money to attract people to you or attract yourself to these unless you are making, yeah, unless you can make that money in a heartbeat, right? And I think for a lot of young people, your mindset really changes when you move from the first to the second level in terms of when you're earning money versus when you're kind of receiving money. Because when you're receiving money from your parents, when you're starting off your uni career and all that, it's very easy to see money as like, oh, I'll just spend it. I feel good about it. It's worthwhile. I did this, right? But when you actually earn money, you're like, oh my God, 30 ringgit. It took me like what, half an hour, 15 minutes to earn that.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this worth the 30 minutes of my time? You really start to make decisions. So in the past, if my friends wanted to go out to eat, I would always be down. I would always be like, yes, 100% count me in. But now I'm more like, you know what? I am becoming like my dad. I have food at home. I have food at home. I can cook.
I am a
And
man of preparation.
I am a man of preparation, precisely. And like you start doing more calculations in your head, right? I don't mind. I can afford 40 ringgit on that or 50 ringgit on that steak with fries. But I could go to Jaya Grocer for 20 bucks. I could get or 25 bucks. I could get like a big chunk of Australian steak. I
Right.
can make it if I know how to make it, I can make it myself. For like 5 more bucks or like 7 more bucks, I can get a bag of French fries and like, oh, I can just get some potatoes and like, if I want to be bougie, like make it
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
you know? So and I'm getting more quantity as well. I'm getting a bigger slice of steak. I'm getting a bigger amount of, I mean, potatoes you can go crazy with that. You can just get as much as you want, right? And
Yeah.
you're spending less and you're eating more. What are you not getting is that ability to socialize in that moment, maybe go with your friends to eat that steak or get that environment and atmosphere. Um, So if you're at that second level where you're earning, maybe you're like in middle income and you want to build your social network, you want to have these enjoyable experiences. I think it's very important to think, right, do is the money that I'm earning enough to actually meet what I want to do? If
Right.
it's not, yeah,
And that, well, a concept in economics that I still remember is opportunity cost, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
So opportunity cost isn't actually money though. Opportunity cost is the foregone, it's not only money. It could be also the foregone
Yeah.
opportunity, right? So this is where an important concept comes in. So I would argue with that previous, the podcast guy's philosophy is that money buys you a very important thing, and that's time.
Right.
So I said earlier, like, oh, right, like, instead of eating out, I make my food at home, which sounds amazing. Like, you don't spend as much money. But think about it like this. I could have ordered food from Grab or something like that. Because now, if I'm making my food, I need to prep my ingredients, which takes a bit of time. I need to cook the food, which takes time. I need to clean, and
Right.
then only I start eating. So it could be like 1 hour to 2 hours, right?
Right.
Whereas if I order from Grab, it's there within like I can work and do whatever I want. I don't need to worry about the food coming. I just go down, pick up the food, I eat it, I dispose of it, done, half an hour,
Right.
and I can get back to work.
But I think what he is suggesting is that if the more beneficial route to take is to save time, then that money is worth spending.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like yes, there is so the saying is penny wise but pound foolish, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be penny wise, but you don't want to be pound foolish, which means like if you can use that money to free up time, which you can use for your work, for your betterment, that's like at the highest level of the pyramid. I feel like this is where you come to the highest level of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. That's where you realize, look, I can actually save a lot of time because you can earn back money.
Yeah.
You can get a job, you can, worst case scenario, take out a loan, you can get a credit card and do all of those things to like get money, but you cannot get back time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of my friends realized is okay, they're going to work in the private sector, they're going to slave away, they're going to save money. And then when they're older, they're going to travel the world, they leave their job for a while, travel the world, explore, do stuff with the money that they save. But you're not getting any young, no one's getting any younger, right?
Yeah.
And like when the time comes, you may have a family, you may have an injury, or maybe your outlook has changed. And it would be like, oh man, I should have gone when I had the chance.
Yeah.
So it's this understanding of like, right, more than money being valuable in and of itself, it's what can you do with the time that money allows you to kind of like explore. This is really um it's barely even related to anything that I do, but there's this channel on YouTube called The Jet Business. I think it's been making rounds, it's very viral. And I just watched like the shots and the guy, the owner of that business, Steve Arsano, he has a saying was that time is money, buy a jet. I'm not saying buy a jet, but I'm saying like that jet actually acts as a time machine because instead of spending 2 to 3 hours at the airport,
Yeah.
you can just go straight to your private airfield, get on the jet, have your business meetings on the jet, land. Within an hour, you're off to your next meeting or you're working on your next
Yeah.
project. So people who are very successful and in these businesses, they buy a jet not for the flexing, the luxury purchase. That happens at the lower levels of the pyramid. They're
Yeah.
buying it to save up time. So I'm not
Right.
saying everyone needs to own a jet. I'm saying everyone needs to think about money as a means of freeing up time. If it's worth it, why not go for it? Is what I'm saying. So yeah, this is like a very long-winded explanation using the pyramid, but basically like it depends on where you are in your career, in how you're starting out in life, how much money you're earning, what are your needs, and how does money help you accomplish those needs? Are those wants? Do you absolutely need to have this very hi-fi social circle, or is a small circle of really interesting individuals who are willing to, compromise, with you when your budget's not always there? Is that more worth it? I'm not saying one answer is right, one shoe fits all. It depends on what your needs are. So that's when it comes to managing money, you need to think about, yeah, like what are my needs, what are my wants, and what can I do with the time that spending that money actually frees up? Yeah, if I was to like shorten everything.
That is it's very beautifully put, and I think time is the one thing that people always forget. Well, me
Yeah.
included, because You will be so. I know we just met, but you would be so disappointed in me when I tell you that when I first started uni, when I first moved back home to Malaysia, and I found my own apartment here, near uni, and I was buying my equipment. I was buying furniture and all that stuff. I saw, I wanted to cook because I knew it's a skill that is very worth learning. But you can also save a lot of money, right? Like your steak example. Do I
Hmm.
go out to a bougie restaurant and eat a $80 steak, or do I buy my ingredients and make it
Yeah.
myself and learn in the process? So I knew I wanted to cook, and I went into Maiden, um, and I was looking at the cutting boards for chopping vegetables and meat and all that. And there was the standard size one about this big, but there was the one for like it's like the junior version. It's like something they use for Master Chef's kids or something like that. And the smaller one was it wasn't even much cheaper. It wasn't even a lot cheaper. It was cheaper by a couple ringgits, couple dollars, right?
Mm.
And I thought to myself like, why would I spend so much more money on like a normal size chopping board when I can pay less and then struggle every time I want to cook? So I paid less, and I found out the tough way. Yeah, I found out the hard
Yeah.
way. And I remember telling my brother, the next time I move back here to Malaysia, I'm gonna buy the biggest chopping board, and I will never stress about, oh, are my vegetables gonna fall off? Is my meat gonna fall back into the sink ever again? So I think that's where you really, how do you say, like hit the
Nail on the
point on
head.
its, yeah, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
um, it's you have to take time into consideration as well. How can I use my money to save time? Because money we can make back, time we can never reclaim.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned the chopping board thing because I've seen the opposite side of the spectrum. I don't think I'm disappointed. I mean, I totally understand. I'm using pans from DIY which are deteriorating so fast. Like um yeah, the first time I bought a pan, actually, I bought like a really cheap pan, and within a month I had to replace it. I was like, yeah, this ain't worth it. I might as well have gone for the slightly more expensive one,
Yeah.
because now I'm spending on the expensive one plus the cheap one. So like,
Exactly. Exactly.
exactly. Humans are very bad at judging based on value. Sometimes we make very bad decisions.
Yeah.
It's experience. Experience really helps overcome it. But I have a standard regular size chopping board, which is thin. It's a thin plastic one, which is fine. Like it meets my needs.
Yeah.
And my one of my dorm mates, because I share the dorm with others, got like this big, heavy wooden chopping board, which I suspect is from IKEA.
Oh
And like
wow.
100%, like if he's like cutting steak and all, it has like a little drain area, so it'll catch the blood, so like you can pour it in the sink.
Oh wow.
But I don't think he does that. And even vegetables, like, so here's the thing, it's a great idea in concept, like it's a big chopping board, you don't have to ever worry about stains and all that.
Yeah.
But it's so big and our dorm is so small that I have literally put my chopping board on top of that chopping board, and I'm using it as a chopping board for my chopping board. It's like I think it depends on it's really more than the size. It's just like, yeah, like you mentioned, the time. Because now I have to like worry about washing my chopping board. And
And then
whatever falls off
chopping
my chopping
board.
board has to also be washed. So I'm just like, and it
Yeah.
is a heavy chopping board. Like it is a workout to just take that thing and wash that thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh my Lord. So
Oh man,
yeah, it's
the
just a
economics
funny
of chopping boards, man.
chopping board.
Yeah, so that is a very good point. But I want to dive into your personal relationship with money, because you shared with us your outlook, and you said that we need to learn how to use money within our means, but also understand that if we can use money to save time, we should probably take that route. So what is your personal relationship with money? And what I mean by that is, how do you use your money? And how comfortable are you with circulating it, or essentially letting your money go?
So I think my philosophy on my practices with money have changed drastically between undergrad and postgrad. So in undergrad, if I was to just briefly talk about, um yeah, my dad was kind of like providing the money for me. So I was very gung ho with it. I would just kind of like spend one day I would be well within my 30 ringgit a day budget. And then the next day, I would be whacking like pizzas from like Mikey's New York pizza for like, I don't know, like $60, $70. Like it would be
Damn.
crazy. Right? Yeah, yeah. I would go to H&M, Uniqlo because we don't have these in Lanka, and I would just buy drip and convince myself like drip is eternal, hunger is
Right.
temporary, like
Right.
like
Starve
like
for the
that's
drip. Starve
starve
for
for the
the
drip.
drip.
If I
Yeah.
have to eat cup noodles for like the last week of the month, I'll eat cup noodles every day, like
Hey, it's
just to
blood,
look
sweat,
good.
tears, man.
Blood, sweat, tears. And then I was like, yeah, but then towards the end, like I think 2020, that was when the pandemic rolled around. So then my dad was still giving me money, but he was also facing difficulties back home. So I was a lot more careful that time. And it also felt like, oh, I should probably be saving money in case I get COVID or I need to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Um, and Monash did a really great thing for us. The international students is they gave us a grant, like a living grant,
Oh wow.
yeah, to actually get through the last few months before like our respect until we could fly out of Malaysia. And that kind of made me think like, okay, right now I know the money's finite, it's
Yeah.
not gonna keep being replenished. So I would be like a lot more careful. And of course, during COVID, you can't really do much. You can't really,
Yeah. Like go out to the
spend too much as
cinema or
well.
whatever, right? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So, and that's when I started to realize, you don't actually need to spend a lot of money to kind of have fun and, just relax and, enjoy life a bit. Of course, staying in all the time, like during COVID, they didn't really bill us for our electricity properly, but now I guess if you stay in, you're gonna have a high electricity bill. But as I moved into actually working I did a lot of like odd gigs when I was in Lanka for a while before coming into PhD.
Right.
I was like, wow, okay, so the money that I earn now is my own to spend. And I was like, okay, do I really do I really feel like I want to spend this money? Because part of me was like, I worked for it, and if I spend it, it's gone. And all that effort, it felt to me like that effort was gone as well.
Yeah.
So I started thinking of how do I grow my money? And I started looking around for advice. And if you asked undergrad me, what a fixed deposit was, would you ever think about investing in a fixed deposit? I would have been like, nah. But now it's something that I really look into. Just for context, for anyone who's in Malaysia who knows about fixed deposits, will be like, why would you ever put into a fixed deposit? Because in Malaysia, the interest rate is very low.
Right.
Because it's a very stable. It's actually stable economies tend to have lower interest rates.
Right.
But Sri Lanka has very high interest rates because they want people to save
To
because the
invest, right?
economy is fluctuating. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's why I chose a fixed deposit. And like then I came back to Malaysia and I was right now. So the uni pays me a stipend, monthly stipend. So I treat it like a salary. It's almost like a salary.
Right.
And from that, it really became about, okay, it's generous, but I wouldn't say it's like I can live like how I lived in my undergrad years,
Yeah.
I really have to worry about it. So I have to pay the rent. I have to usually at the beginning of the month I get the stuff that I have to pay out of the way. My rent, my phone bill, electricity, all of that, laundry,
Utilities. Everything.
utilities, everything is paid for and out of the way. Then I know that okay, the rest of the money that I have is something I can spend without thinking, oh, I might not be homeless the next day or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then it's like, okay, so from there it's like, okay, so I do love eating food. I do love trying the food in Malaysia, but I also know that I can get access to groceries for quite cheap over here.
Right.
And I am quite happy with my cooking standard. I like my level of cooking. And I need a certain amount of calories. I need a certain amount of protein that I'm not going to get if I eat from out.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? I have to
Unless you
spend a
spend
lot.
a lot. Yeah. Exactly.
Unless you spend a lot, especially protein, right?
Yep.
I spent a little bit of time I spent 1 week in Melbourne and I was blown away by, yes, it is expensive if you pay in ringgit, but what is it? When you eat something that the portion size is immense,
Yeah.
like fish and chips, like a $10 fish and chips, like you are getting like almost a full fish in that box,
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas over here, like there ain't no way, like what is the equivalent? I think 40 ringgit, you may or may not get a big fish. You'll get a lot of additional stuff, but the fish size.
Yep.
So I was like, I can cook at home. I can increase the portion size almost indefinitely, and like the cost is definitely cheaper.
Mm.
I can spare the time for it. and it's something cooking is something that I find enjoyable. I find it's de-stressing. So that's something that led me to like, okay, I can save on food. Then when it came to stuff like fashion, I really started to embrace what's known as like a capsule wardrobe, which is where you buy really good pieces
Right.
that you can mix and match instead of like
Yes.
just buying and buying and buying, you know?
Yeah.
You just buy like one or two staples and you can just match between those like continuously and always look fresh, always look good,
And
right?
create new combinations with the fixed amount of clothing that you already have. Yeah.
That you have, exactly. And one thing in the past is I just had too many clothes, like I wasn't wearing them. So now what I do is I even like, I'll go to H&M, I'll trade in those clothes, get that voucher, and then
Mm.
go and buy something, you know? And yeah, like you can actually achieve like a very good look, you can achieve a very good overall well-being by just kind of saving money in these places. But one place where I haven't really saved a lot of money is my rent. So I stay on campus at university. So I stay at one of the new towers,
Right.
and it is very expensive. Like there's no need to sugarcoat it. It's quite expensive.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, what that means is I save time on the commute. It's a 5 minute walk to work. If I forget something in my workplace, I can just nip back to the office. If I go to the office and I forget something from my home, I can just nip back in a second.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very good gym, so I don't need to spend money on a gym. They
Membership.
allow
Yeah.
me to cook here as well. Yeah, so it's like yes, it's very expensive, but I'm saving so much time. The gym is literally downstairs, cooking is downstairs, the university is like 5 minutes away. So I have more time to spend on my work, to spend on things I enjoy. Of course, there are going to be cons, right? Like you're always on campus. So it feels like, wow, it's like I'm always working. It
Yeah.
doesn't really feel like there's a holiday. But when you have a separate home, it's like, okay, now I'm home. I can kind of like really de-stress and relax. Kind of like you're away from the work environment.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas here, it's like being a hop, skip, and a jump away. It's like, are you really
You're
like
caught in the
home?
middle, right? It's like,
Exactly.
like work is just a walk away.
Work is just a walk away. Yeah, yeah. So it's always on your mind, which I guess is okay for the duration of this PhD. But of course, in the long term, you would want to have a separate place from work.
Yeah.
Um, and in general, like I've realized, like, yeah, when it comes to spending, I spend on the things that I really need, but otherwise I really am careful with it because I realize like, oh, I can earn a lot of money by doing various jobs, various side projects, but it takes a lot of time. Once you're
Yeah.
putting in the work and earning, it's like, oh, okay, this money is valuable, not because of the money itself, but because of the effort you put to get that money.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. And like right now, I think so I was saving a lot of money and I was just saving it for it. I've become someone who is very much, I will not work overtime unless I'm paid. I will not work extra projects unless I'm paid. Um, because then I don't mind because it creates a lot of stress, obviously, working overtime and all. But it's fine if you get, for me personally, if you get the money to compensate yourself for that.
Yes.
So recently, my old laptop actually just like the motherboard crashed, and I was like, oh no, I need a new laptop. And I could have just bought like a standard one, but I was like, I've saved up money. Gaming is a passion of mine. I can always justify that I need that enhanced graphic card for my
Yeah.
PhD work,
Yeah.
and all of that. And yeah, and then I ended up dropping quite a lot of money on my current laptop, which
Right.
I've not been very upset about because I took the time. Even like in the past, I would have probably just gone, asked the guy at the store, what's your best what do you recommend, and they'd probably like price me out of it, they'd give me something which is expensive but not necessarily the best for its deal,
Right.
whereas here I spent like a whole day checking out what's the best bang for its buck, and I went and bought something. So it really, like, as much as I earned the money, I was like, okay, I'm willing to spend it, but it's on something that I really need and I really enjoy,
It has
and
to
it's
be
something that's
profound.
worth. It has to be profound. Yeah, it has to
Right.
be worth it. So my philosophy has changed in the sense of just spend it to kind of like now it's I'm really careful because I appreciate the value of it. And I'm not averse to spending if it saves time or if it's something that really assists me in my day-to-day life.
Right.
But it's always like also growing money as well has become like a big concept to me. Like, how do I use my current amount of money to grow it? Because I think for everyone in our generation, they kind of need to accept that you need to have multiple sources of income. In this day and age,
Yeah.
it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Your regular job is not going to be enough. If you want to get a house, if you want to get a car in the future, you want to start a family, you cannot be relying on one source of income. You have multiple sources of income
Yeah.
to earn that. People have been looking at the stock market, unit trusts, back home it's fixed deposits. So um I've really started moving towards that point in my life where I'm just like kind of always thinking about money, but also thinking about like, right, what can I do with that money in terms of like bettering myself, self-actualization. So
Mm.
yeah, don't get lost in the pursuit of money is like my current goal. Like I do not want to get completely encaptured by that. I want to kind of earn what I need to get what I want,
Yeah.
but also kind of like grow it and keep that security in the background. Yeah.
That's amazing. And well, right before you finish, you were talking about, well, don't get lost in the sauce, right? I think too many people are so obsessed about making money for the sake of just having money. They don't necessarily, and then I think it is a very big thing here in Malaysia because I know people personally who are so obsessed with just making money. They don't want to spend it, they don't want to travel with it, they don't want to eat good with it, they just want to make it to have it. And it just, well, it's no, we're no longer in the 90s or whatever where you keep physical money, but they just want money in the bank. And not even for the sense of security because they want so much of it to a point where you could say they're living in excess, but they don't use it. And
Right. I mean,
yeah, and
yeah,
it's like
sorry,
it's
sorry.
just so sad to see though. If well, personally, in my opinion.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, the economist in me agrees with you. Like, because as I previously mentioned, when you earn and you spend, that's someone else's income, which
Yeah.
trickles into the economy. It does hurt as an economist to hear people, unnecessarily saving. That can also be a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for our generation, like for our parents' generation, that would have been a great tactic. You save, you save, you save, you can buy a house. You save, you save, you save, you can buy a car.
Yeah.
Um, but in our generation, the rate at which the world is advancing, the changes in it, inflation could just skyrocket, right? So for
Right.
me, when I was in Lanka, my savings literally were halved overnight in terms of like the ringgit. So like when I
Oh
compared them
wow.
to the ringgit, the value became half literally overnight during the crisis.
Wow.
So it was like, yeah, this money is in the bank. I'm not, spending it unnecessarily, but through no action of my own, it's suddenly worth half of what it was
What
yesterday.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, like that's how really bad it can be to hold on to that money in this current day and age of like uncertainty.
Right.
So you definitely do need to keep money in the bank for a rainy day. That is a must. I think everyone should do that. But there is always, I think in our generation, you have to think about growing that money, rather than keeping it aside in a deposit and in your savings account. You should think about like putting it in a, unit trust, putting it into, I think in Malaysia, yeah, because fixed deposit, you're not going to earn much. The money market, maybe some cases, I think you mentioned it earlier, like shoes, right? Like Jordans. You buy a limited edition Jordan. Sure, everyone will be like, why do you need to spend so much money on shoes? But give it time, right? Because if it's limited edition, you give it like 2, 3 years, no longer on the market, you keep it
Yeah.
in good shape, you can sell it for like probably more than you bought it.
Yeah.
Watches. I had a friend who bought a watch for like I think 1,500 ringgit, and he was able to sell it for twice its value, like I think 3,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. So like there are purchases where you can buy it and just keep it, and it accumulates value,
Hmm.
right? And like it's a bit robust against like money in and of itself. That's why a lot of people who are wealthy, they don't only have their wealth in cash. They have it in properties. They have it in assets like, firms, companies, capital, stuff like that. Maybe like designer watches, luxury items that accumulate value over time.
Right.
Of course, it's very tricky. Like for example, like Cactus Jacks, which is Travis Scott's, collaboration with like I think the Cactus Jack Jordans. You just need Travis Scott to come out as like saying something controversial or doing something illegal, and the value of that becomes garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah, nothing's ever 100% safe.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip, having, if you have a lot of money and you put it into different kind of asset vehicles or different kind of places where you can keep it and grow it,
Yeah.
you kind of like safeguard against that all your eggs in one basket. Because I would say having all your money in the savings is all your eggs in one basket, right? You need what you're just one crisis away from all of that money halving,
Having
or
no
like
value as
even
well. Yeah.
having no value, yeah, and halving, like literally becoming half of its actual value, like literally, like yeah, that could happen, right?
Yeah.
And it's great also to kind of like explore these different options because along the way you will meet and network with people, you will meet and find out different ways that you can actually grow your money, but also spend it and
Right.
earn from it. But I understand the concern of, you keeping money aside for a rainy day. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But definitely, if you have a large sum of money, consider like 30 to 35% of that, just investing it or something like that. So
Right.
it can grow. Because for our generation, you need to have those multiple sources of income on top of your everyday job if
Right.
you want really good things in life. I think I read somewhere some like financial analysis in Malaysia. She said like what you need to earn about 10,000 ringgit a month to be comfortable. And I was like, wow,
Wow.
I don't even know if I can earn that much by the time I'm
As a
30 even,
single individual.
as a single individual. And she said, like,
Wow.
when you become, yeah, when you have a family that becomes 20,000,
Yeah.
and it's like, wow, like, that some people might never achieve that salary in their lifetime, you know?
Exactly.
So, and I can't say that she's wrong because the cost of living is going up and it's ridiculous. I don't think young Malaysians can think about owning a house uh in this day and age. Like not all young Malaysians can think about owning a house in this day and age. So yeah, these are things that are very, I think, but these are things that you also need, right? You do
Yeah.
need your own house, you need that security. Renting is fine until, something happens, or maybe the landlord wants to, do some renovations or some big issue happens. So and also it's always that security that's there when you have a landed when you have your own house or your own place. You don't need to pack up and leave
Exactly.
because you are the boss of that decision.
Exactly.
Having a car, like sure, renting a car is great, but it's also good to have a car on hand that you personally own, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be a Volkswagen, it doesn't need to be a McLaren or anything like that. But yeah, in this day and age, it's very important to have those multiple sources of income. Saving is also important, but I don't think it should be the only thing you're doing with your money. Yeah.
Right. You've actually answered my next and final question, which is how would you
Oh,
advise people to be more responsible with money? So that's amazing. But to sum up what my understanding of what you said is, of course, it's important to save money. It's important to have money definitely for backup. And again, going back to what the podcaster said, having a few months rent in hand just in case, right? And then you gave the example of deposits as well. If you want to move, of course, you need to pay whether it's a utilities deposit or a security deposit, whatever it is, right? But you also encourage us to diversify our investments, because if we just invest, well, first of all, if we don't even invest and just leave money sitting in the bank, we're not using money to make money, right? We're just leaving it stagnant. But if all we do is invest in a way that's like in a very singular way, we're putting all of our eggs in one basket. So you encourage us to diversify. Oh, maybe invest in stocks, maybe look into properties, maybe look into companies and stuff like that.
yeah. I mean, of course, I don't know how many of people in our age bracket have the money to put into like properties and stuff just yet. I mean,
For
if you
sure.
do, that's great. That's great. But yeah, like you could of course everyone's money is their own money. Like I'm not gonna say you should do with your money in the way that I, claim you to do. Like definitely it is your money. Like this is just like an opinion or an advice piece that
100%.
everyone can just consider. Because like yeah, because inflation, like I mentioned earlier, will always be chipping away at your savings and crises and stuff like that could always do even more damage.
Right.
But yeah, spending the time to just take a little bit out and invest it elsewhere could be something interesting and very beneficial to people.
Yeah. And on top of that, would you do you have any other advice for? Oh well, we talk about people. Let's focus on specifically university students. Would you have any more advice on for university students on how to be more responsible with our money?
Hmm.
Don't go
I
Kia.
feel like yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah.
go clubbing.
No, I did all of that when I was a student. So this is the I'm not giving like, oh, don't do this. I didn't do it when I was a kid. No, no, I did all of it.
Right.
This is my advice in hindsight. No, I think clubbing is fine. Like, if you enjoy that, if that is your thing, if and it's a great way to meet friends, maybe partners, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want to enjoy it, like go ahead, like do that. But I think, yeah, I think maybe when it comes to clubbing, you also need to understand you will build a friend group when you go clubbing that is probably always gonna want to go clubbing.
Yeah.
So from my personal experience, I had a friend group, amazing people, but they went clubbing like every Friday. And I just couldn't keep up because like, financially could not. I just could not keep up.
Yeah.
And personally as well, I was like, once in a while is pretty great. But every time it's like, it's
A
it's
little
all
bit
it's all fun
excessive.
and games. It's all fun and games till it's 2 a.m. and you're stuck at Trek with no grab or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's like two or three people passing out or
Yep.
vomiting or something like that. So it's like, okay, I spend the money, but at the end of it, do I enjoy the money that's going into it? That's a question. And like, I think what a lot of people in maybe this applies more to international students than to Malaysians, but um, like when you want to do one particular thing, let's say you want to go clubbing, have you accounted for the other expenditures that end up happening that most people don't think about, like the Grab back in the day
Exactly.
when, yeah, before Air Asia came in, before what is it, the Body Driver, I forgot the name. There's a
In
third app as
driver? Is
well.
it in driver?
In
Yeah.
Driver, exactly, yeah. Before they came along and Grab had a monopoly, we were paying like $40 to go to Trek.
Oh yeah, it's
30 bucks to
painful.
go to trek. It was painful. So you really had to organize a group. So it's like, I feel like a lot of undergrad students think, okay, I'm going to go clubbing. I'm going to put aside, 200 ringgit or something for like that night in the club. But have you put aside money for the Grab? Have
Yeah.
you put aside money for the pre-drinks? Have you put aside money for uh the hangover food that you're going to order the next day when you can't cook, even though you got ingredients rotting away in your fridge?
Yeah.
These and it's very hard. It's very hard to be perfect. Like I know for a fact I'm gonna take a grab, or I know for a fact I'm gonna order in tomorrow. You don't know these things, right? So I think it's balancing that, keeping that need to or the desire that you have, which is fine to go club, but also keep in mind that there's gonna be hidden expenditures.
Yeah.
When you're planning that, it could be something wholesome to everyone, like planning that trip to Langkawi or Tioman. Like, have you considered the transport costs? Have you considered the cost of the place that you're going to? One piece of advice I can give is don't be too thrifty. Like I was very thrifty when I went to Tioman, and I didn't spend a lot on the resort. I'm not going to say what resort it was, but it was not great. It was not great. The bathroom smelled of fish,
Uh huh.
and like the view was amazing, but the place was all right.
Yeah.
So I
The
was like, you know what?
mosquitoes
The
paying you a
mosquito,
visit.
the mosquitoes were fine. It was just the place was just
Okay.
it was a place to sleep in. That was it.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah. So like you do want to kind of stay at a nice place. I don't think that's a bad thing. So keeping it within the budget, but also enjoying the experience is important because you're only going to do that maybe once or twice in your life.
Yeah.
So enjoy it as well, right? Don't be
Yeah.
too thrifty that you end up ruining the overall experience with this, like, this thing that you purchase, which is not really your cup of tea.
Right.
And I think aside from that, it's mainly just like being ready for sudden expenditures. So I think in Malaysia, um, I feel like it's a weird kind of conundrum where social media is very strong, but the advertising on it is for everything you don't need, right? Up until it becomes that one thing that you be. So I am very big into K-pop,
Okay.
and the concerts they just drop it all of a sudden out of the blue. It's like the pre-sale date, because if you miss the pre-sale or the sale event, you're not getting tickets for these things because they get sold out
Yep. Yep.
immediately. And it's like 2 or 3 days before the sale goes online, you'll suddenly see a random Instagram ad. And then you're like, wow,
Right.
I need to start saving money for this, I guess. Like, yeah,
In 2 days.
in 2 days, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as an undergrad student, I went for Zed, I went for Ed Sheeran. These kind of concerts just suddenly just popped up out of the blue. Like suddenly it would
Right.
just be like, oh, Ed Sheeran's coming to Malaysia. The sale is going online like tomorrow. And I'm like, what the? Okay,
Yeah.
I guess we're doing this now. So
Yeah.
you need to, you need to get you need to be ready for these sudden purchases. These things can happen. Obviously on the more saddening side, on the more serious side, it's like, you could injure yourself or something,
Hospital
and you need to
bills. Yeah.
chip in. Exactly, you need to chip in that money until the insurance comes in. I think for Malaysians, if you're not under insurance coverage, then yeah, it's out of pocket,
Yeah.
expenses. You have to pay out of pocket. So I think keeping that in mind as well, because it's very tempting to be like, oh, I've got a really big amount in my savings. Maybe I can, chip away at it. But if you've already met your quota for the month, just keep it. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. Yeah, yeah. But personally, me as a international student undergrad, I had no savings. I had like $200, I think, three
You
hundred
had a
bucks
lot
in a
of fun
dream.
though.
I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of
Yeah.
fun, but I had had like $100 in a dream.
Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
essentially, be prepared by saving, but don't overdo it to a point where our university experience is ruined.
Exactly, because you're only going to get this one opportunity unless you do postgrad, but then the vibe's not the same. But
Right.
you're only going to get that one chance. Like it's a magical time period when you're in undergrad and you're in uni. You know, it's the world is your oyster. You can have fun, you can enjoy, but you do learn the life skills of budgeting and all of that.
Yeah.
It's as you put it, like yeah, don't give up on your fun as well. Yeah,
Fram, you're making me regret not seeing Martin Garrix, man.
Martin Garrix. Oh, he
He
came.
came December.
Oh, for New Year's, right? Was it New Year's?
No, it was the one before. It was a EDM festival that they did in maybe Summer Lagoon. I'm not too sure, but he was, yeah.
Oh, was it? It wasn't Pinkfish because I know Pinkfish was Kashmir.
It was
Oh,
Peak
okay,
Storm.
okay.
It was Peak Storm.
Oh my God, yeah. I think at the same festival there was like a K-pop group called G Idol. Was it this or something else?
Yeah,
And
I
some
think so.
Sunway Lagoon has been, yeah, they've been dropping. So they are a big group, right? So I would
Hmm.
have expected more ads online. Literally on the day of the actual concert, they were like G Idol performing, and I was like, where was this like a week or two ago? Like I
Yeah.
had just, to be fair, my funds were very low. I had been to Singapore to see twice. So,
Oh,
and in
okay.
Singapore, so like my funds were at an all-time low. But
Yeah.
I was like, if I had known about this in advance, maybe I could have like come back a day early from Singapore and like,
It's in the
like
Malaysian nature to procrastinate, so we do that with our
yeah,
announcements too, apparently.
it's Live Nation. It's the ticketing guys, man. I swear they have a monopoly and they're just milking. I swear they just drop it if they only realize like, oh, we could have sold a few more tickets. Let's
Right.
let's really ramp up the marketing. But
Right.
otherwise, let's keep it low key.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's tough. But Fram, thank you so much for your time. I appreciated this conversation that you've blessed us with, and honestly, my mind is in a bit of a mess. I think my
I hope.
my my cranium is gonna increase in size for sure. But thank you so
Oh
much.
no.
Is there anything you would like to add? Anything you want to talk about?
I think no. I think overall, right now, projects wise and everything, yeah, I'm just working within the uni. But yeah, I just hope I was able to kind of like give a bit of an insight.
Oh,
And
100%.
definitely when it comes to economics, like the key theories and principles, I think anyone who's been listening continuously, please do go and do your own research. I am not the be all end all of those theories and statements.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would totally recommend anyone who's interested in economics, like, it doesn't need to be an actual course at university. You could just look it up online. You could do your own reading, just learn a bit about it to help you better understand what's going on. Yeah, that's basically it from you don't really need to do a full on course. Don't waste your money and your time if you don't like it. But
Fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you so much for your time and thank you for speaking with us. This has been the Pineapple Party podcast. I will drop. Oh, are you on socials by the way?
I am on socials. I will debate whether I am giving. I think I'll give my LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn would be the
Okay,
most appropriate,
perfect.
probably. I could
Whichever
drop
you're
my
comfortable with, I'll be more than
yeah,
happy to
yeah,
share.
sure, yeah, definitely, definitely. Thank you for having me. Like, yeah, it was a pretty enlightening conversation for me as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I hope I was able to ask insightful questions. And my mind was desperately running a marathon trying to catch up. But thank you for your time. I will drop your LinkedIn. And of course, we can discuss which social media you're comfortable with me sharing. Again, if you guys enjoyed, if you guys have been following up with the conversation, please share this video to your friends. They don't have to be future economists. But yeah, share, like, subscribe, all that. Thank you for spending time with us. And again, thank you, Fran, for your time and your expertise. This is the Pineapple Party Podcast, and we are signing out.